tātou. We'll get started if we can.
With online.
We have online.
Morning, everybody.
Sarah and Martin, are you able to turn your cameras on?
Waving.
No, I don't have quorum. They're not responding.
Have we got quorum?
No, until the cameras come on.
Can we call them? Ewan, we haven't got quorum. You just be, and please know.
Oh, okay.
You're not alone in that. Oh, we do. Quorum has just walked in the room.
Wonderful.
Thanks, Sarah. And now we've got Martin as well.
I am here.
Excellent, thank you. All right, excellent. So we have quorum now. We'll open the meeting. Good morning, everyone. We'll ask Tame to open our meeting, please.
Hormone here. Today, probably, ngā memo o te kaunihira, ngā memo o te hapori. Ana ki tia rātou I rungi te aroha. I te hunga ko whetūrangi tia. Moi mai ko te kariki. Ki te kengi, I haere ki te tangihanga. O te tumuaki. Ki te kengi tanga āniru. Moi mai ko te kariki. Tātou e whai nei. Tēnā koutou. Tēnā koutou. Āniru.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Tame. Tame and I represented council yesterday at the tangi of Anaru Tamihana at the Rukumoana Marae, and it was a beautiful celebration of his life. And I just want to note today our vote of thanks on behalf of council for the good works that he did as the kingmaker under the Kingi Tuheitia, but also in the local community, not just where he comes from, that marae, but also in Hamilton. And some of the kaumātua yesterday were outlining some of the projects that he has done right here in the heart of this city. Some I'd forgotten about, to be honest, even though I've known Anaru for a very long time. So we do note with great gratitude the service of his life today. Thanks, everyone. All right, are there any apologies for the meeting? There are.
We do have apologies from Councillor Pascoe for the day, plus Councillor Nigel Ralph and Councillor Hamilton also for partial attendance, and
for a gap between 2 and 3, and then I'll rejoin via Zoom.
thank you.
2 and 3, yeah.
Oh, no, it's going. Cool. Thank you. Is yours going now?
No, mine seems to not be turning on.
Mine's not turning off.
Okay, I will send you someone over here. Oh.
I do just have an apology. I will have a small gap around 3:30 just to pick up a small one from daycare, and then I'll be back on.
We'll be finished
online.
by then, won't we, Madam?
Well, yeah, and I'm hoping to, I don't know, who knows? I am hoping to wrap up about no later than 4:30 anyway, because of the big game tonight, and we have a day set aside tomorrow so we can get through across the 2 days. We have to do the Chief Executive Review Committee today. What?
What game was that?
Ireland versus Māori All Blacks. No, you've got tickets. You've got tickets for them. That's not true, Dave. Everybody got offered tickets.
No, you got offered tickets and 10 minutes later they were taken because there were only two pairs. Swift.
Oh, I have nothing to do with tickets. All right, excellent. So are there any, I'll move the confirmation of the agenda, seconded by Councillor Van Oosten. And, move the apologies be accepted, seconded Councillor Van Oosten. All in favour? The confirmation of the agenda is moved by me, Councillor Van Oosten, seconds. All in favour? Any conflict of interest? Nope. Okay, we'll go on then. So we're on to item 5. These first item 5s to 10 are just, we should whiz through quite quickly. They're confirmation of the open minutes, so only if you have a matter of rising, but also if it's a matter that's furthered later in the agenda. Let's not do it here, let's do it later when it comes up. So I'll move, is there any reason why I can't move the suite? All right, I'll move the suite from items 5 to 10. I'll give you a moment to make sure there's nothing on those minutes that you're concerned about. Ewan has seconded it for me. Everybody comfortable with those? Yep. All in favour, please say, raise your hand. All right, thank you.
Motion is carried unanimously.
There you go. Let's stay at that pace. Chair's report. There's nothing really to say on this Chair's report. It is set out as it is set out. Some of the items that are referred to in the report do get covered off later in the council, and that's where I prefer to deal with any matters arising. But any questions of clarity, I'll take now. Councillor Bunting.
I do. Thanks, Mayor Paula. I'm just wondering if it's syntactic or whatever. There just seemed to be a little bit of conflict in the language, and I'm certainly not picking holes, but I'm trying to work out your position on it. This is about the length of time for submission. You've made it clear that you believe it's too short for that. But then in the next sentence, you've expressed confidence that the public will be able to make direct submissions and that they will be heard, basically, or confidence. We will be able to relay to the government with confidence how Hamiltonians feel about their proposals.
Well, what I guess I'm saying there, Mark, is that we will do our very best to get this as widely distributed in the community as possible over this short. And we've all agreed, we had this debate at the time about the shortness of the two weeks, and everybody was agreed it was too short. But that's what we've got. Let's make the most of it. As guess on what I'm saying there. Yeah,
I know, but we've kind of expressed confidence that they're going to be heard in there, and I was just wondering if that was a little bit too confident, considering all the noises will be made.
Everybody who submits in this period will be heard, and their views will be reflected. I guess that's what I'm saying, but look, I can take that sentence out if it's going to cause angst.
It does worry me a wee bit, because my next question was going to be about, could we relate to the government with confidence about Hamiltonians' feelings about the waters when we've taken twice as long to confer about a dog park, for example. So would we still have that confidence? I don't know that
we can remove that sentence. It's
that would
immaterial.
Be wise.
It was supposed to be an encouraging sentence to encourage people to embrace, and that everybody who embraces this opportunity and everybody who does submit, either directly to Select Committee where they can or to us, I'm confident that we'll hear those set of views.
We'll hear those ones, yeah. Okay, so would you consider taking that sentence out?
Yeah, fine.
Thank you.
I really don't think, it is semantics. I'm happy to take
Thank you. Cool.
Look, let's move on because it's really, there's a substantive item later on that is worth spending time on, but this is not. So let's move on to, I'll move that my report be received if I have a question. Sorry, Ewan.
Sorry, Mayor Paula, I've made a small error. I should have declared right at the beginning with the agenda item on plan change 9. I'm sorry, I had sent it ahead, but it just skipped my head. So plan change 9, I won't be involved at all.
Okay, so we note that when it comes up.
I'm sorry.
That's all right, that's fine. I've moved that my chair's report be received. Councillor Van Oosten, second. All in favour? Oh, okay, cool.
Mayor Southgate, so are you saying you're taking that sentence about
confidence
out, are you?
Yeah.
So can you do that or not?
I can do whatever I like with my report.
That's great, because I won't support the motion, the Chair's report otherwise. So I can take it that that's been taken out?
Yep, you can. And let's keep the discussion where it should sit later in the item.
Well, it's part of the Chair's report, so it seemed like a
But don't forget the Chair's report is a statement of time, and so, but I'm not going to argue about it. It can come out.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, item 12, Magical Bridge. We did all in favour. Thank you.
Motion is carried, noting that Councillor McPherson is dissenting.
Oh, sorry. I didn't think there was anything much to speak on.
Well, you didn't notice what was going on.
Would you like to say something on it now?
No, I'm not going to say it about, I'm going to talk about the process now. It's the Chair's report and there's resolutions arising and they can be amended or whatever.
Voted against, etc., but you can't change a Chair's report once it's written
in here. You can't change the,
Remember that.
just like you can't change a staff report. You can disagree with parts and get amendments to resolutions, but
Well, I'm
the
not sure
report
about
is the
that,
report.
but we'll look into that in the break. I'm not sure about that. As the author of the report, I think I can. But anyway,
I'm happy to vote for the chair's report as it was provided.
Okay, well, it's been amended, so thank you. Magical Bridge Trust, item number, did we do all in favour? Yes. We did, okay. Magical Bridge Trust. Thank you. Some happy news, Maria. Yeah. Welcome, Peter. Welcome to the team.
Thanks. Morena, Mayor Paula, elected members. So today, the purpose of this report is to inform Council on progress with the Magical Bridge Trust New Zealand proposal to develop a fully inclusive playground at Claudelands Park and to seek approval from you today to work in partnership with Magical Bridge to develop that playground. Now, I have got Peter van Vroomhoven here as the chair of the Magical Bridge Trust New Zealand, and he will be able to respond to questions in relation to the funding and the progress. And Gina Howard, who many of you know very well, but today she is here in her capacity as a board member for Magical Bridge Trust and as the person charged with the design work for the proposal. So with two very capable people here with me today, I think I'll leave it there and open up for questions.
Thank you. Thank you. Questions, councillors? Hang on, sorry, let me just get my discussion button up so I can see who's first. Councillor Bunting.
Cool, thank you. And I'd like to signal that I'd like to move the staff recommendation, if that's okay.
Yeah, and I'll be happy to second.
Thank you. But just to give us some reassurance, so stage one, which our contribution would get us to, can you give me an indication of the relativity between sizes of what we've got now and what we would have at the end of stage one? Because my only concern with this is that we are reducing the size overall of our play capacity. So can you calm me, please?
So before I let Gina respond in more detail, I'd like to point you all to page 76. So there is a plan in the attachment there. It has colours, so the colour pink is phase one, and the dotted line you see is the current existing playground area. And Gina has a bit more detail.
Yep. So essentially the current playground and the new stage one are the same size, right, and they deliver the same amount of play value. So although there's some different items, there's still the same quantum of play available, and the same facilities in terms of the shelters will still be in place, and picnic tables and barbecue, and we're proposing that the Flying Fox area is not till phase 3, so we're suggesting that during phase 1 we'll leave the existing Flying Fox open, just to add that, and then that will be...
Maxine's happy.
Yeah. So that's in place. Hey, it's a playground for everyone,
Are you asking for Maxine? Or is... Oh, that's good. Okay, thank you. All right, now, without prejudicing any discussions you've had already, Peter, funding is the other grey area for us all, I guess. Sure. But indicative discussions you've had, obviously, and I'm not putting words in your mouth, but you sort of once, if we vote on this today, that should make it a little bit easier for funders to approach it with confidence? Or?
Absolutely, Councillor Mark. Yes, I mean, the funders are are all on board. We're talking quantums and timing with some of them at the moment, but certainly having the full council endorsement going forward would mean that they could make their decisions with a lot more confidence to know that the full project is going to be delivered. Yeah. Okay. And my last question is around the timing. So say we approve this today, stage one gets built when?
Next financial year.
So not this one coming up?
So next month.
Oh, next month. Okay.
We start. So, so the concept designs have been designed. There's a little bit of community consultation just to check in on types of equipment, some procurement, and in the new calendar year, the construction crew would move in.
Okay. And then stage two, what's your, I mean, it's obviously on funding, but what's your
Yeah, so we've had some very, very constructive conversations with a number of funders in line with what you've seen in the funding strategy from the previous documents. We were invited by a significant funder in Hamilton to apply for $1 million. So that was an invitation to apply. So obviously we're pretty confident that given they invited us, that's a reasonably confident bid. And we're having, there are other conversations and applications being drawn up at the moment, also in line with the funding plan. What that basically means, Councillor Mark, is that I'm pretty confident that before the bulldozer moves in, we will have funding in place for at least stage 2.
Wow. Cool.
Okay, so we would like to be able to, we would like to think that we could build stage 1 and stage 2 at the same time.
And stage 2 is the green, yeah?
Stage 2 is the green.
Right.
And then it is my further desire to continue some pretty hardcore fundraising and then raise the balance during construction so we can go straight into stage 3, either as an ongoing project or to tack it on afterwards straight away.
Sorry, Mark, it may be helpful for councillors to note that our external funding team has had a look at the plan. There's a high degree of confidence that stage 2 funding can be achieved, and there is a go, no-go for that phase 2 development of December this year. So the aim is to secure the funding by December this year and then roll out the phase 2 delivery concurrently with phase 1.
Gee, that's good. Cool, thank you. I could talk all day about it, so I'll stop.
Councillor O'Leary.
Thank you. 3 questions, possibly all to staff. And just following on from Councillor Mark's question around what we're actually getting. So in phase, if the Trust is unable to raise the funds, in phase 1, we get the slide and climb element and we get the sensory element. Given this playground is also supposed to service the surrounding neighbourhood, with only those 2 elements, is that enough for the neighbourhood to feel like this is a playground I can take my kids to and spend, time?
We believe so with the keeping the flying fox, but understanding that there is some community engagement to test that, and there's also swings and spinning equipment in there. So
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Now, next couple of questions probably haven't, to my knowledge, haven't been raised before. So when we're looking at the car parking there, and it's a decent amount of parking, but are we going to be increasing the availability of disability parks in the area to service the playground?
Probably, and we've also been talking to H3 about accessing the larger car parks that are currently slightly outside the play zone to offset that.
Okay, but H3 doesn't have enough disability car parks as it is, so...
So what I'm suggesting, Councillor Angela, is that there'll be further disability car parks allocated in the Clawlands Park, like right adjacent to the playground.
Yeah.
And then to offset the loss of those to the general public, or...
Oh, I see. Then they would shift to using H3 space. Okay. It just, we obviously need to keep a really sharp eye on that because building an accessible playground with not enough disability car parks would be senseless. Now, we were told that stage 1 was the 1.4 million to renew it, which is basically replacing the whole thing. Our destinations playgrounds are around 1.2 million anyway. So does that mean that if the Trust is successful and we end up with a $5 million playground that is in council property, a council asset, that in X years' time we have to renew that also with $5 million?
Yes, so it will be vested as a council asset.
Yeah.
And there is a note in the financial section noting that there will be additional consequential OPEX to maintain that extra size, and we would need to deal with that through an annual plan or 10-year plan process.
So would renewing a $5 million playground be $5 million?
Yes.
Yeah. And where is that in here? It's not.
I don't think it's implicitly mentioned, but
okay.
But it would be vested as an asset and go into the depreciation process for the renewal.
And how long, what's the life of this playground before it needs to be fully renewed?
The destination playgrounds work on about 10 years.
About 10 years, okay. All right, great, thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Angela, I also need to point out that there is some of the cost would be in the landscaping, which wouldn't need to be renewed, so we'd have to do some figures around that to provide accuracy. Yep.
So then that we will, if this, well, this process will probably go through today, but then with the LTP, which we'll start work, or the new council will start work on next year, we'll make sure that that renewal is in a budget line somewhere.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay. Is there a way to do it where we don't have the full renewal cost in one financial year?
Yes.
There is.
Depending on the elements and the equipment,
Yeah.
and when we get the final design landed, we'll be able to work that out, but I believe so.
Yeah,
Councillor
okay,
Angela.
great. Thank you.
Thank you. I think all other questions. Oh, no, Councillor Van Oosten.
Just following on from Councillor Angela, just wondering about the wear and tear on the equipment. Is it the same for the disability equipment as it is for our general equipment? We would expect the same time frame.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. No further questions, so we'll go into debate. Councillor Bunting.
Thank you, Mayor Paula. Right then, let's do this. It's been. I was nervous when this came through the first time because I'm worried as chair of community that we would be reducing the overall size of our play facilities around the city as a quantum. But I'm reassured today that it will come back like for like at stage one and only get bigger. So I'm happy with that. I was nervous about the funding, but in conversations with Peter and the team, I feel more confident, and having our team having reviewed it and coming back saying it's a sound plan, I feel a lot more confident as well. And, you know, now I'm going to let myself get really excited about it because I believe this will happen now. Ultimately, I would have preferred a brand new one in a brand new place, but, you know, these guys are stuck to Claudelands, and now I've got to say rightfully so. I think it is a great spot, so I wish them all the very, very best for it. And, you know, I'm going to look back with this, with a tremendous amount of pride, because this will be the first of its kind in the country, and it will really shine a light on Hamilton Kirikiriroa as a, I guess, a city that's doing something really quite progressive and cool for the disabled community. And I look forward to, you know, in the next term, potentially lobbying for adult play facilities as well and spreading out the offering there. So, yep, it's a bold project. It's a real partnership, and I'm really happy to move it today.
Thank you, Mark. Councillor Hamilton.
Thanks, Chair. Look, just really want to say good on you, Peter. I know you've persevered with this for a while, so well done. And I've noticed more and more that Maria has a very fun job.
Councillor O'Leary.
Thank you. Look, I'm really supportive of this concept. I'm really supportive and have been my whole term or my whole tenure with council for the disability sector. They are a quarter of our population, and that's what, around 70 or 80. No, it's not. It's about 45,000 Hamilton residents. And when you add on people who might not consider themselves living with a disability, but living with an accessibility issue for all sorts of reasons, that's, you know, that could get up to 70 or 80,000 residents. So this is a really great opportunity, and I wish the Trust every success in the world. It will be a really special thing to be at the opening of a playground like this. The irony of it hasn't escaped me in terms of we will be accepting a $5 million playground onto our books, and I struggled and fought really hard to save destination playgrounds, which were only $1 million 1 or 2 terms ago. So thank goodness we have a more supportive council for children that struggle with things that hopefully we will never have to in our daily lives. So all the best, and
Deputy Mayor Taylor.
Thanks, Mayor Southgate. Very quickly from me, I want to congratulate Peter for driving this right from the outset, relentlessly. I've known Peter a long time, and man, he was in everybody's ear right from the start here in a good way. And he has just shown incredible drive and determination here, and I want to congratulate him and encourage him to be sitting around this table in future years, starting in October. Well done, Peter.
Yeah, there's a broad hint.
Councillor Nigel Rove.
I just want to add to what everyone has said. Well done, Peter and team. It's such an exciting project for our city. It's good for everyone, young and old and abled and disabled. And Claudelands at the moment is such a busy playground, so I think this will only add to it. But like Councillor Angela mentioned earlier, it's important that we do cater with enough parking and access into the playground. I think it will tie in really well with the work that the Settlement Centre is doing just a few metres away in terms of that inclusive space. So well done and looking forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Van Oosten.
Kia ora. I thought I was after Sarah, but that's just fine. Look, I'd like to join my colleagues in thanking Peter for his persistence on this one, and also Georgina for the great workup that you've done on it as well. We've seen over the last couple of years just how important social connection is to us and how much we value it, and to be excluded by way of a disability isn't something that we would want to see in our city. So notice that parks are a great way to be able to really get that connection. I enjoy all of our parks around Hamilton with my grandchildren, and especially that Flying Fox, so I'm pretty chuffed to see that stays. And that, in fact, we don't just get a park, but we add a real opportunity for every part of Hamilton and all those within it to be as inclusive as possible. So kia ora and thank you very much.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. Just quickly, I also just want to say thank you both for all of your work and all the best for fundraising for this, an incredibly exciting project. And what I really love about it is that it's a fully inclusive playground. So it has, it's going to have exercise equipment, it will have a tot area, it will have a swing area, all these different areas that mean that no matter what age or ability someone is, they can find something to really enjoy in this space. And I think as a new parent, I've found sometimes you go to a playground and it's like, so there's actually nothing that a 2-year-old can really play on independently, or that's or you struggle to find suitable things. They can go out on a slide, but they can't get up the ladder to get there. And so I feel that this is really well thought out in terms of providing something for everybody, and it's going to be a very popular destination playground in the future. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Gallagher.
There are those who talk of pet projects. There are those who stick to your knitting. There are those to say that local government should just be about infrastructure. I would say to those people, this project is exactly about infrastructure. It's about inclusive infrastructure, and it's exactly what local government should be doing, and in partnership. So big shout out to the Magical Bridge Trust for vision. And this is about a city that is going to be fully inclusive. This is a really, really good project, and thank you for everyone involved.
Thank you. I think it, Councillor McPherson.
Yeah, thanks. My turn for an election speech. Look, agree with everything that's been said there, and certainly thank the proponents for pushing this along. But what I actually want to remind Councillor that the next step is that we should be getting playgrounds like this pretty much everywhere around the city. I think it's no secret that if you have a decent playground that's usable by a wide range of people, then they're well used by the city, probably better used than just about any other facility we can provide, other than maybe the roads and cycleways and footpaths. But next after that are kids' playgrounds, and I we've argued for years about how much we should spend on them. I think that argument is well settled. We have to start actually having a program in place from the next LTP to provide this sort of facility everywhere around the city. Not necessarily at every single park, but certainly within the, go back to that old thing, within 400 metres of every house, is there a usable playground? And I think they will be well used, and we'll get good kudos from the community if we can provide them.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll just add, oh no, I won't. Oh, are you? Yes, you are. So I'll have a quick moment. I agree with Martin that this absolutely is the business of council, and in agreeing that, I just do want to note the vision of former councils. Every council gets to inherit the good and the bad and the in-between of the previous councils, but there was a vision that was before this council for playgrounds, and I do want to acknowledge that for the destination playground concepts, etc. We have actually delivered award-winning high-quality playgrounds for some time and excellent play space, which is awesome. So I do want to thank our staff for that work. I know that this one will be another. I'm absolutely certain this is going to be an awesome award-winning playground. And the reason we've been able to do that goes back to something very dear to me, that's partnership. So we really appreciate the work of the Trust, Peter, and we appreciate the way you've worked alongside the staff to make the vision come together. As everyone has said, we've talked a lot about inclusivity and accessibility this term, as I'm sure they have in previous terms of council. This is actually walking the talk, not just talking the talk. Peter, you and I were at the Sports Waikato Awards together not that long ago, and there was already a huge buzz of excitement about the work that's being done here. So I can't wait till we have it built and people can see the fruits of your labour. It'll be an excellent hub. Claudelands is an excellent hub. We've got the event centre, we've got the settlement centre, we've got Jubilee Bush. And I just note, I'm sure councillors are aware of this, but we had the Volunteering Waikato Awards last week, and Jubilee Bush, what's the Māori name for it again? Te Papanui, in the, with the original forest stand there that's been looked after, was an award-winning Volunteering Waikato project. So people have been in there for years and years and years restoring that fabulous piece of bush, very rare really, because it's right in the heart of the city. So this playground just complements and brings all people together amongst each other into this fabulous space where they can do so many things and connect with so many activities. So I'm very excited. Write a reply, Mark.
Thank you very much. Just very, very briefly, I think I've got a fairly strong feeling this is going to get over the line. And I echo everyone's praise, I echo the praise to Peter, but I also have this theory about the second dancer as the real hero. Like, you go to a concert and there's always someone that gets up and dances all by themselves, and they're considered a nutter until someone comes along and dances with them, and then it's a dance. And so Gina and your team, around, there's a lot of bravery and a lot of belief in there, so and a lot of tenacity, so I'm confident about this. I'd remind people to get very excited about the play strategy, because this is really what it's all about. This is just a part of the play strategy. It's specialised play. I think destination playgrounds are fantastic. This is a specialised, or if you like, a nuanced destination playground now, and we should be starting to look at these next term with like I said, older persons playgrounds. We can revolutionise play in New Zealand, and what's more, I'd love to see access to those playgrounds becoming a part of the play experience, cycleways, walkways, etc., being all part of the fun with art pieces and play facilities all the way along them. And we can do this. We can do this, and there's no reason why not. And if we've got a community out there like that who are willing to put their hands in their pockets and their hands on their hearts and go for it, then we should capitalise on that energy. So, yes, brilliant. Well done. Let's go do it. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll go to the vote. All those in favour, please raise their hands.
The motion is carried unanimously.
Thank you. That brings us on to item 13, community-based committee reports, please. Good morning. Right.
Tēnā koutou katoa, Mayor Southgate, councillors, members of the public. This report was requested by Council as part of its final resolution or proposal for the representation review, and staff are reporting back now. It's a combination of 4 online huis, which was part of a targeted consultation, a workshop and briefing with elected members, as well as a review of other councils who have direct relationships with community-based committees and organisations to help inform the report. Just briefly on community-based committees and organisations, they're a far more informal, flexible structure than what you would see in a community board or a council committee, and they're usually driven by the members of the community, relevant community themselves. The key drivers for community-based committees that came from our online huis were centred around deeper collaborative engagement on a community level, advocating for community issues and interests, and also empowering the community. So giving the community authority or using their know-how at a grassroots level to come up with solutions for neighbourhood issues. So the staff options are covered out from paragraph 27 in the report, which you would have seen. If council supports any of the options other than, I suppose, the status quo, that would become a decision or a recommendation to the incoming council to consider after the October elections. Staff would then report to that new council with more details on the recommendation from this council, including any additional costs that would be required to give effect to that recommendation. Option 3, as stated in the report, is staff's preferred option or recommendation. It's centred around enhancing the connection that council already has and supporting community-based organisations that are already in place. Staff consider that this option would help achieve the key drivers which I've mentioned in the most effective way. Staff would continue to work with the community over the coming months to refine that structure and a process to enable improved community engagement and connection. And I'll pass to Philippa just to maybe briefly highlight how that option 3 would work in practice.
Kia ora koutou. So internally at Council, we are looking forward to the opportunity to build on the great connections our community groups and houses hold. We share the same view with many of them that something needs to change in regards to their voices and that of the people in their community being heard. Option 3 would allow us the opportunity to define what an enhanced version of what we currently have in place will look like. Like option 1 and 2, our recommended option would see Council appoint elected members as a governance liaison across the community houses and groups involved in this proposed model. The Community and Social Development team would provide additional support to strengthen the connection between the community and community groups, and then in turn the community groups and council operations. The reporting channels would also be opened to these community groups, giving them a stronger and clearer voice within the council committee meetings. A number of community house managers aren't keen on creating another layer and see a risk with the current voices of our community leaders being replaced with new community-based committees. With options 1 or 2, there is also a concern that our already stretched community leaders may be asked to step into the community-based committee roles, and if they took on this role, it would split their time with the work they are currently focused on. Something more than our current network meetings is needed, but as we've seen over the past few years, we have strong community leaders who we are listening to and relying on to provide the voice of our community. Option 3 allows us to explore how we can enhance our current structures, and we have keen interest from our community leaders to be involved in shaping this proposal for the incoming council.
Thank you.
Almost ran out of breath there, but open for questions.
I'm happy to move option 3 to put that one on the table for discussion. Some people may have some other ideas. If there's a seconder, but otherwise we'll hold it as a motion for now. Let's go into questions. Councillor O'Leary.
I'll second.
And
Oh, hang on. Ewan, you did
Ewan
what?
seconded.
I'm happy to second.
Oh, okay, thank you, Ewan. Councillor O'Leary.
So, Councillor Maxine and I put a motion in last night. What's that?
That traditional problem of it needing to be.
Well, it never used to be like that though, because we get asked, can you please
to put
give us...
forward things, but until it's accepted by the meeting, it's still a
And I'm
motion
apolo-
or amendment. That's our
Yeah, I
problem.
apologise, I didn't know there was one. I'm happy to, you can be the motion, I can be the amendment. It's as long as both get debated. What's your motion, Councillor O'Leary?
Can you put it?
My motion is to recommend to the incoming council that we establish a trial for 2 new community committees as outlined in option 1.
Okay.
So governance, can we get a clear ruling on that process? Because, sometimes elected members are under pressure, reading 1,856 pages now, to get motions in the night before. So it needs to be clearly understood then what the process is. If there's no weight in having those sent forward, then I'll remove the stress out of my nighttime reading.
Absolutely. So until it is accepted by the meeting, so tabled here,
Yeah.
it's not.
Okay.
I think there
there
may
is a
be-
point of working
I wonder
with
if-
the,
Sends an emotion to governance, then it has to be notified to the meeting so that they have a chance then to debate which
So
one
I think
first.
that's the solution, Dave. I agree. I think that's the solution. I actually wasn't aware of that one. If I had been aware of that one, I probably, as chair myself, would have said there is one and that I've got an amendment. So I think, although Amy's right in terms of the formalities of it, I think we can adopt a process amongst ourselves that if there is something that's come in, that we note that they've come in the order that they've come in. Because I've got one later on today, for example, that I've drafted. So
So we'll do that and then circulate them so that everyone knows prior to the meeting what's coming in what order.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Otherwise, obviously, the chair of any committee has an advantage because they get to speak first. So, okay, all right. Can you just send that in an email just so we know what we've agreed and...
Yeah, look, I'm happy with that.
Yeah.
I would have done it that way had I known. Or, and we can work out sometimes whose a motion and whose amendment accordingly. Angela's will be the motion and Ewan and I will have the amendment. As long as everything gets debated, I'm quite happy. All right, questions, back into questions. Let me see if I have any. Do we not? We don't have questions? I do have, oh, did you have your questions, Angela?
One question, but I've disappeared off. Mark?
Yeah.
No? Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. Just one quick question, actually. Given our proposal was to set up community committees, and according to the feedback of the majority of stakeholders, they're saying they want new community committees. I was surprised at the staff recommendation. So can you explain to me why you recommended against the majority of submissions asking, stakeholder feedback asking for new committees? Hospital pass, Brendan.
I think it was looking at what the drivers were, what was the actual purpose of either setting up a committee or what was the actual purpose of wanting this in the first place, and looking back to who were advocating for the community.
So it was my proposal, so tell me what the purpose was.
Yeah.
Tell me what I was trying to seek.
No, I suppose there's two things, I suppose. First is that the resolution requested that staff report back on the setting up 2 committees on a trial basis. And so the report does that in the sense that there's details there as to how that's done. So it addresses that. Then from a staff perspective, and I'm happy for the others to add here, is that looking at what's the actual drivers that came from setting up a new committees, and looking at the deeper engagement that was talked about from community stakeholders and the advocacy, and was there another way that can be achieved more effectively, and that's where I suppose the staff option came from.
I guess would it be fair to say though that and I'll just preface this with saying it's a brilliant report. Like, you've laid out the roadmap for community committees perfectly. I'm really impressed. But is it fair to say then that when I look at the consultation, and I note that when the report was presented just now, that some of the concern was that those community people might have their time split and there's a bit of a conflict. It was never in my mind that it would always be those community people, because there are a whole lot of other people living in the city. So is it fair to say that those stakeholders, I mean, they represent a wide range of community groups, but they're focused on what they do and their, it's not narrow, but their sort of gambit, as opposed to, and I raised this prior to when we went out to consultation, Joe Public. We didn't get to general Joe Public that are not connected with a neighbourhood house or a marae or a settlement centre. There's a whole lot of those people as well, and we didn't get to that. So are the comments where you said that, you know, there was some concern around splitting of roles and there's not enough time in a day for me to work here, and now you want me to, you know, be involved in this? Is that sort of, they're looking through their lens, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, part of the feedback that we received through these sessions was around the type of communities that they said that we should focus on, which is around rangatahi, our Māori community, and the areas of our community that are less engaged with us at local council. And so that naturally drew us to those voices that are involved with those communities. So I guess from that, there was a bit of an assumption that they would be key stakeholders in this space, because they represent those communities more so than the Joe Public that you're talking about. And so that is taking the feedback that we heard, that's part of the influence to option 3.
But aren't those marginalised groups is not the right word, but aren't those groups connected through all of these stakeholders anyway?
They are connected to a certain level, but as we've heard from these groups, they still don't feel like their voice is being heard to the, you know, at the right level. We're giving them 5 minutes in a public, submission at the start of a committee meeting, and they want more than that. And I guess what we're proposing with option 3, looking into this further, is how can we connect more of our community in with these community houses and community groups that are already doing a great job and whose voice we're already relying on. So I guess that's part of that discussion that we've had, and as a team we do spend a lot of time connecting some of those groups that we've mentioned with our community houses, but what about your Joe Public that aren't connected like you said? And I think there is a part that we can play in enhancing that connection, which has more benefit than just a community-based committee. It's actually that community that's being built there.
But isn't it also fair to say that in terms of Joe Public, Joanne Public, whoever, who are very disengaged with council, that, shoot, I forgot my question, never mind.
It'll come back. We'll move on. We've actually got a whole raft of questions. I just have one that I was going to ask when I put the amendment up, and I'll come around as long as anybody's got questions. In terms of the groups that, because I've always been interested in empowering those groups that I think you were just referring to before. So in terms of community groups, we've got some who've done really good job that need support to continue their work, like Zeal, H-Town, Age Concerns, the Age Friendly City Group, etc., Seed, and a whole bunch of others. This, as I read it, this option 3 would empower, and they've all come to me at different times looking for support to continue and to get deeper involved. This option 3 you see as strengthening and supporting them to become more engaged advocates on behalf of their community to council. Is that?
Yeah, I think there's definitely capacity for that, and that's what I guess we're asking for, is the space to put something together for the incoming council to be able to create a structure that people could opt into. It will, as we've noted within the report, it will require additional resource, but supporting those voices and the communities that they connect with, that there's definitely room to grow there, and that's what I've heard through discussions with these community groups and, with yourself as well around some of those key groups like Zeal. What does it look like for their voice to be heard and for them to be better connected with council and with our elected members as well.
And some of the other work that we've been doing in schools, like Rotatuna High, Girls High, where we've been engaging with youth in civics, that would be part of this? Is that what you see?
Well, it would create an environment where they could be invited into that. So it may not, but it's obviously not about setting up new structures, but creating building those relationships and those connections so people feel that they have got a space to come along, to share their voice, and then we've suddenly got a louder and clearer community voice, which our current community leaders will be able to bring forward to our council staff and elected members. But again, it does need more fleshing out, and that's what we're asking for.
So the next phase of work, you'd be looking at exactly how those groups populate, what their resource base is, what the mandate of their work is, etc. Is that the next phase?
That would be the next phase over the coming months, and we have had interest, from our community leaders to be a part of shaping what that may look like.
Okay, thank you. Food for thought. Thank you. Councillor Bunting.
Thank you. I was interested in something you said, I think it was you, Philippa, about how these are community-driven, right, rather than us-driven. Was it you or you, Brendan? Yeah. How do we, there are already the groups that Mayor Paula, for example, mentioned, Zeal, H-Town, all that, we know those groups. And yet the groups that Angela was talking, or Councillor Angela was talking about, are the average person who's just trying to get by, who we really do need to hear about. How do we stop the loudest voices just getting louder? And how do we keep the spread? And so making sure that we do reach those people who may not otherwise engage, or just, who would be, I would suggest, the most useful to hear from. Please. In 20 words or less.
I guess option 3 allows us to explore that further, because I think personally, I guess I would have probably referred to myself as that Joanne public previously, but now being connected with our community houses, what's stopping them having a wider spread? It is not just our youth, it's not just the people that are in greatest need. Those community houses are a place for us to strengthen our community and our connections, and for people to build off each other. And so why can't we help facilitate more people being involved in our community houses? So it's not just the voice of the most in need, it is actually a fair representation across a community. My concern is, I guess, and I'm hoping you'll be able to allay it, is that it would take nothing for some of these vocal groups who I very much appreciate coming in and doing the 3 minutes, but they also have other opportunities to come in. Like we all sat around with Phil the other day and looked at bike stuff, and that's very hot at the moment. So they're being heard. What I'm worried about is the people that aren't getting heard around it. What's to stop them getting in and dominating a community house, for example, who don't have the same sort of structure that we have?
I think that you run that risk with any of the options, Councillor. Brendan could probably speak to it more than myself, because he said direct experience with community-based committees, but to be successful they need to be community-driven. But also to be successful you need the people who have got the drive, and what you tend to find is the people who have that passion are already working in your community anyway, so you still have that challenge with a community-based committee to try and reach people who are in that hard-to-reach group, because the people who are already working in the community will naturally gravitate to those anyway. I guess perhaps over time, with both the option that staff have proposed and also with the community-based committees, you'd work at trying to get the unengaged engaged. But I think that's probably a challenge for all models, realistically.
And last question, I would assume they would come through the community committee, most of these, but would there be some that could come through to, I don't know, growth and infrastructure and the likes? Could you set up community groups with specific agendas or specific expertise?
I think that's something that would need to be fleshed out a bit more with either a community-based committee or staff's recommendation.
Yeah.
Because it's depending on the council's governance structure in the new term, there might be somewhere where these groups will get channeled to where they naturally fall, but others might be more topic-based.
Okay.
So if you've got a particular group that's interested in traffic improvements or safety, then they might get channeled by the community development group to the appropriate appropriate committee.
It's kind of like it happens now.
I don't think that was 20 words though.
That's all right. The question was even longer, so don't worry. Thanks. Thank you, Mayor Paula.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Paula. Look, just a couple of questions regarding the finances of option 1 and 2, if I could. I see in the first year, option 1 and 2 would be around the 300,000, and then potentially going forward in 23-24, it comes out at about 380,000. I'm assuming that's per year.
Correct.
So over a 10-year period, adding this additional level of community participation as outlined in option 1 or 2 is approximately just under $4 million. Is that correct?
Yes, it is correct, but that's based on a model of two community-based committees. So we are proposing a trial. So if that was to be extended, then that obviously would need to increase significantly depending on how many additional committees are set up.
Yeah, look, thank you for that. That was my exact point. So one assumes if you scale it out and you were to go to 4, you can pretty well double it, so you're close to 8 million over a 10-year period. Is there any research or during your inquiries of other jurisdictions that the types of outcome that would be achieved through option 1 or 2 versus the staff's recommended option 3, is there any suggestion of any more positive outcomes for that significant investment of money?
The short answer to that would be no, but there's a lot of variables that would be in play, and I think that's already alluded to, is it's very much dependent on the type of community that is involved and who is representing that community, and the additional resources outside of council that they may have access to. So the success depends on a number of variables, some of which would not be within council's control as well. Excuse me.
Thank you. That was, and sorry, I did have 2 other questions. I see as part of the remuneration, some of the financial implications for costing, including training, etc. I didn't see any in regards to IT. Would each of these elected bodies, including the individual committee members, would we need to supply them with IT and equipment? So I'm just trying to get a better understanding if this is the entire likely quantum. How have you resourced each elected member in Model 1 and 2?
The assumption is that, and this is just based on the experience of other councils and other community committees that are in operation, is that councils usually do not provide the technology support to those community committees, so they usually rely on their own means of communicating between themselves. But should council want that to be explored, that could be certainly included in the report that comes back to the new council.
That's an interesting approach in light of the fact that, you know, they would have to have some sort of proper administration process. One would assume they would have to have the equivalent of Diligent to deal with committee papers. Who's doing the printing? Are we giving them access to Diligent? I'm just wanting more depth and understanding, because often it's in the incremental creep that real explosion of expenditure occurs?
I guess the response to that, Councillor, would be that community committees by their nature are far more informal. They don't have the formal agenda, process or structure that a council committee would have. So there's not usually a full detailed reports like there would be for a council committee. Usually there's kind of like a 1 or 2 page agenda which sets out the list. A lot of it's just verbal reports and updates and discussions as to how they operate. And so they're usually driven by the community themselves and the members who are on the committee. They drive that process themselves rather than being driven by a council team or administrative team. Again, that there is an option to explore that, and should council wish to, and include that in if council wants to go with options 1 or 2.
Okay, we can come back to further questions.
Thank you.
Can come back to you, and if there's further questions, Councillor Gallagher.
So obviously context, this is merely a first reading, because all this is just purely a recommendation to an incoming council to consider, which they can enhance, tear up, whatever. So I get that. Option 3, you say it's building an enhanced connection and support to existing community-based organisations. So is it fair to say that's more or less what we're doing, but only better?
I think there are a number of elements that would be better than what we've got at the moment. I mean, you know, yourself, you're a regular attendee at the West Community Network meeting, and a lot of that is about agencies just sharing what's going on in their space. And so talking with some of the community house managers, they have acknowledged we do need more than what we've got, and the ability to really target what our community's voices are. So it would be better, yes.
See, the problem I have, and it's really good you use the West, I'll use them as an example with Neil Toland and the team there, and that's one I know, and there's duplicates around the city, and I respect that. I go and others to a network meeting, and I'm merely hearing from other agencies about what they're doing in an area. It's not a democratic connection with that community as such. It's an information sharing. It's useful, it's valid. So if we took the Western Community Centre, what actually changes, if I'm looking, because the whole point of this was to look at a trial for enhanced local democracy, which means that the voices of Norton Crawshaw has a greater impact around this chamber, not exactly the full community board, but a beginning. How would this, if I'm going into that centre in that community, how is this different as against the option 1?
So I guess that's the opportunity we're asking for, is to explore that, what that may look like. For example, if we look at the Fern Network, they're probably, what they discuss when they congregate is quite different to what happens at the Western Community Centre, and they are more of a representation of what they're hearing. They're talking about what are the issues for our people, and they provide more of a consistent voice to council in that sort of forum. And so I think it's about developing something similar to that across other communities, but again, talking with our community leaders and asking what that looks like. You know, Neil, speaking with Neil, he's the first to acknowledge we need something more than what we've got right now. Network meetings are great and there is a place for them, but we need something more than that as well, and we're asking for an opportunity to explore that.
But this is the option 1, which is a trial of 2 areas, and that's won't go, you know, of 2 areas of the city where you set up, if you like, an embryo community board, and that is a trial. That's literally what it is. We see what works, what doesn't work, to enhance grassroots democracy. I'm still trying to struggle to see how, on the option, very good report, on the option that you're finally gone for, that we actually really get those grassroots voices. And is
that a question, Martin?
Yeah. Well, the question is, how does that grassroots democratic representation look like under the option you're going for? Because you're not talking about a local community committee or
And that's what we'd like the opportunity to explore over the coming months and then provide recommendation to the incoming council on. So, yeah, I mean, the decision does obviously sit with you, and that's where that comes down to, but our recommendation through internal discussions and discussing with the community is to go with option 3.
So just final question. Apart from this being an enhanced version of what we have at present, how is this really different? How is this dramatically different to what I call business as usual? Good business as usual, but we can improve.
I think there'll be a few elements. The key elements that we've discussed initially is how do we support better engagement with our community houses from the general Joe public. What does it look like to give our community groups a louder voice at council, so not just 3 or 5 minutes at the start of a committee meeting, and better connection with our council teams earlier on in their planning process. So at the moment we are working towards that, but there is more effort that is needed, and we hear that loud and clear from our community. Don't come and consult with us at the last minute. Come and ask our opinion early on. And I think that's something that we can investigate and look into here and weave into this enhanced model that we're recommending.
Thank you.
Councillor McPherson.
Yeah, I sort of, the comment to you, Madam Chair, I think it's a bit unfortunate that the questioners are almost debating with staff here. And it's not sort of staff's fault, but
yeah, sorry, I was listening intently and I realised that.
A bit of missed process where there should have been workshop, because my understanding, and this is not a question, it's sort of a point to you, the movers of the motion democratically got it passed, but they haven't obviously been consulted, and this is the first opportunity they've had to discuss the staff's findings.
I'm not sure why it didn't come to a workshop. I know that our workshop. You make a good point, Dave.
Yeah,
we did have one. We had one workshop.
Well, but I think that Councillor Angela's made a legitimate point. That how come what's come back is not something in support of the motion that was passed. So
we can ask that as a question, and we'll get a good response.
Yeah, well, she sort of did, but staff sort of said, well, our best advice is something different. Well, this is not really how council works. So you're debating through the question, Dave?
So if we can, yeah.
No,
we are getting into a discussion.
I think it's a legitimate point to say if there's been a motion passed in council.
There hasn't been a motion passed. There's been some workshops and briefings.
No, there was.
Oh, to trial something. Yep. So it's the interpretation of what that. So it's an interpretation of what that trial could look like that we're really discussing here today.
But it is something different.
Yes, I know, but staff. And,
I have sympathy with what the staff have come back with, but it's not what.
I hear you, but I guess the staff can interpret what that report should be, and they can speak to their thinking. I guess we can hold true to council's thinking if that stacks up. So I think it is what it is. Yeah. We have had a couple of bites at this cherry. Let's allow them to answer on that matter. Why it's substantially not picked up.
I know if it was in my committee, I'd expect the staff report to come back not countering a previous decision. By all means, give advice, but not a resolution proposed.
Lance, do you want to say something about that?
I was just going to ask Brendan and Mish, we did have a briefing and discussion on the 23rd of May, and maybe just refresh everyone's memories what happened at that, and also what was the original resolution, what to bring back.
So the original resolution, and I stand to be corrected here, was for staff to report back on a process to establish 2 community-based committees, one on the East Ward and one on the West Ward. So that was the original resolution. The 23 May briefing covered a number of options, or the three options from memory, and one of them was the option that is being put forward of working with existing community-based organisations. So that was part of that.
But was there any formal resolution passed at that workshop, or was it passed at was the only formal resolution what was passed at a meeting?
Well, yes, only at the meeting because no resolutions.
So why isn't the formal resolution referred in here as the starting point?
It's in the report.
I was just looking for...
I hear what you're saying, Dave, but in a way we could go around in circles because Angela has the motion which
but
does sit.
I think, you know...
And out of fairness, I've allowed that to happen.
I've got a feeling that several councillors feel they're having to debate with the report writers, and that's not a good position.
That's very unusual in this council, isn't it?
Absolutely unusual, never happens.
Look, let's carry on through the questions. We are where we are. Once we've had the questions, what I propose to do is to take a 10-minute break for a cup of tea, and then we'll come back to the debate. And of course, if we find we're not progressing, we may have some other options to go back to.
Can I just say there wasn't a unanimous view at that briefing from what I can recall personally, but and I know Mish has probably and Brendan have probably looked at the meeting notes and that sort of thing. So I think, Councillor Dave, that's probably what you're referring to, that we generally try and, you know, with our more informal discussions is try and get to where most of the elected members get to a similar position. And we don't always reach that, but I think that's what you're referring to.
Lance, you're putting the workshop ahead of the actual formal decision.
Yeah, no, look, I understand that.
They talk about bringing back a process, and that's what we've done. We've got a range of options there, and you know, they're all valid apart from the one that says don't do it, because the Electoral Commission actually said something else. So there's actually three valid options there.
So I think the
problem is the recommendation.
Hang on, Dave. I think the point is well made that in actual fact we had a decision, then a workshop, and really the workshop should have preceded the decision. Having said that, we don't get all councillors turning up at workshops or briefings, so they're often a subset of views, but we'll look at how we tidy that up, that process up. Do you understand what I'm saying, Mish? That we gather the genuine views of a workshop, and that comes into the decision making, because this has gone the other way around by the sounds of it.
Yep.
But however, I think we can progress this. We've had, I think the questions can explore the strengths and weaknesses in each one, and we'll take a break and come back to it.
I would like to go on to my questions now, unless Councillor Ryan wishes to move that the motion be put, of course.
Let's have some questions, please.
You mentioned network meetings as a possible element, I guess, in my words, within the forum. What makes you even raise those? Because network meetings, in my experience for going for them for 25 years, and in several different parts of the city, are that they provide a forum for service providers from outside a locality that happen to operate in that area, not for the local community much.
I guess we've referenced them because that is currently where we have people gathering together on a regular basis, and so there's potential to build into that same sort of rhythm, that connection with the wider community.
But they're not the wider community, they're from that locality, they're people from outside, you know, who come in, who work in that area, but as part of their professional jobs.
But how could we bring the actual community into that sort of forum rather than just having those agencies?
Okay, it's a fair, reasonable point. Look, the community centres, did you explore, I have some sympathy with them being raised in conjunction with this, but did you explore the possibility that they might be physically a place to house a community committee, but not the actual people who ran the community committee, you know, simply a central meeting place for the wider community committee that Councillor Angela's asked about, if you get the distinction. So in other words, say take Western Community Centre, you wouldn't be asking Neil Tolan to do the work, you would be booking a meeting there and he may attend as one of the community people. So did you look at that aspect of it?
I suppose options 1 or 2 would be covering that type of scenario and set out in the finance considerations that would be using that type of community house as the venue or base for the meetings, and not necessarily meaning that those who are representatives of that house would be members.
Sorry, I
Sorry,
Yeah. No, sorry, I was just stopping a side conversation because it echoes.
Then I didn't hear the last bit of what you're saying, Brendan, sorry.
So short answer is yes, that would be encapsulated in options 1 and 2, where community houses would be used as the venue, or could be used as the venue for community-based meetings.
Right. And how much did you look at the possibility, I'm not talking about the money to resource the actual meetings, but giving community committees that have some legal or recognised standing, let's say, within council, the power to, say, make recommendations, official recommendations to council committees or to full council on spending on local elements. And I'm not sure whether I've totally made myself clear. When I was on a community board at one stage, which I recognise slightly different legal standing, they were given power by their council to make decisions on things like footpaths expenditure and local speed limits and things like that.
And that, I think it is canvassed in the report, and probably it could sit with any of the options 1, 2 or 3 that could work with, and that would be a decision of the incoming council as to what powers, if any, they would want to pass through to that structure that's set up.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Dave. Councillor Hamilton.
Let's try and refine my questions down a little bit now. In option 3, I'm not sure who I'm directing this to, but I'm sure one of you will answer. You talk about an MOU or service level agreement would be completed with interested community houses. What if you have 17 community houses that want an MOU? How do we manage that?
I think that will be part of the recommendation that we bring forward to the new council, is around how many we could successfully sort of operate with, and we would then have to select which ones that would be if it can't be all of them.
So we're then sort of in a position we've got to cherry pick.
Yeah, and I guess with options 1 or 2, we're doing the same thing with cherry picking. Well, not cherry picking, intelligently selecting where it is most suitable to set up a trial of these committees.
Yeah. Question I think it's through all the options, but it's identified in option 3. This might come across a little bit critical, but I'm just trying to be honest. Will be completed with interested community houses or organisation. Are community houses the old way of dealing with things like 30 years ago? I mean, now we've got sports groups, youth groups, church groups, business groups. No one really goes, well, I won't say no one, but is it the right model to have community groups as we used to know them, sort of yesteryear?
Well, that's a hard question for staff. I think you need to think about that, Ryan, and I don't think I should put that burden on staff to determine where the value of community houses in the question, but...
Okay, it was just reflected in the report, that's why I picked it out. But my other question then to the mover of the motion, which I think is Angela, just a clarification from the staff or the option 3 and your one. What was just for clarity, what was the difference or the intent of your motion?
So I think option, because 1 and 3 are all quite similar, aren't they? Hang on, what page are you on? Oh, okay, so option 2, so option 1 is specific in having an appointment panel appoint half of the new committee and then have an election of half of the new committee, whereas the other, I think 2 are a bit different, aren't they? New committee.
But what was your motion?
So mine is to establish the trial for 2 as outlined in option 1.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Question from Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Paula. Just a quick question around can you outline in some more detail what the independent review would look like in terms of assessing the success or not of any of these options that we choose today?
If options 1 or 3 to 3 were taken forward, then that would form part of the report that would come back. But effectively, the independent review would look at the success criteria that council and the relevant community committee or organisation form, and whether that's been achieved would be the fundamental purpose of the review, and then look at potential options as to can this be rolled out further. So that would be the 2 main points for an independent review.
Okay. And in terms of funding these, so would we be likely, the new council, be making a decision prior to the first annual plan, or would it be establishing them post that annual plan with that funding, or I guess is that just up to us, the council?
That would be up to the council to decide, because there's no funding at the moment. So depending on the timing for when you'd want to get something underway, you'd potentially be looking at sourcing additional funding for the second half of this financial year, and then trying to build something into the annual plan process.
Right.
So it's really a decision for that council, and I guess how quickly or not it would want to move a trial along.
And how long do you think that we would need to have, say, community-based committees or whichever option's chosen up and running before there can be a really meaningful review of their success?
It was suggested, I think, in the report, it's at least 2 years would be needed to do that.
Final question was just around the resourcing for the options 1 and 2. It talks about 1 full-time comm dev and then 1 full-time comms person. Is it like, would we be able to function with these, I guess, with less, say, and I mean, is a full-time comms person for 2 community-based committees necessary? Just wondering if, we need to go that far, and we could still support a good trial.
I suppose the estimates there are on a more conservative basis, and it's on, I suppose, experience that have come through from other councils as to the expectations and needs that have come from community-based committees as to what involvement they would like from councils. There's always the option of council saying we can provide this amount, and that would be, again, a decision for the incoming council to make if options 1 or 2 were taken.
Is the purpose of the communication support to just get information out to the community from deliberations and decisions made by the community-based committees, or is it more than that?
I'm not a comms expert, so I'll look to Nicole to add on.
Without knowing what the scope of the community-based, sorry, it's just otherwise council.
Without knowing the scope of the community-based committees, we don't understand what support will be required. If they bring forward additional projects, that will require additional comm support. Do they want profile within the community about their committee, about their role? That will require additional comm support. So without knowing the scope of what they are actually going to do, if they'll have funding, what they'll be supporting, we can't confidently estimate the support required. So as Brendan said, that is a higher estimate. But how the comms team currently work is each council committee does have a dedicated comms person who puts out resolutions, works on those projects, works with you on stories, etc. So it's going with a more modest approach.
Okay, so if we make a decision on an option today, then you'd be able to come back to the new council with kind of a more detailed and idea of what this would all look like, or is there still a lot more work to be done around actually setting them up first before we understand the scope?
Probably a bit of both, councillor.
Okay.
If 1 or 2 is the recommendation that goes up, we would do some more work on refining a proposal and talking to the community about how they'd like to see things, I guess what their view is, how these would run. but because of the nature of them, as Brendan has said, have been more informal and more flexible, some of it would really be only crystallised when you got around to getting members of these committees together and talking through what their needs were. So it might be that you set a budget and maybe it's not specifically comms that they need, maybe there's some other resource that they need as well. So you might say that, you know, comms is allocated 0.5 and there might be some other resource that they want as well. So there may be, I guess, what's been put in the report is what we think you would need, but obviously if it's a community-based and community-driven committee, there might be discussions around what that council resource ultimately looks like.
Okay, thank you so much. Yep.
And if there was to be an election for these committees, obviously that would require quite a significant amount of comm support.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so we've got still quite a few questions. Want to sort of get through them. Councillor Van Oosten.
Thank you. I just wanted to pick up on further points from Councillor Gallagher with regard to the options, and should an option one be approved by the meeting, would we necessarily be excluding the opportunity to enhance the relationships with the community houses? I guess, you know, if we choose one option, do we just wipe out all of the rest, or is there still the opportunity to enhance those relationships with community houses as well as a community committee?
No, there's no and, there's no or. There's, you could have an and. It comes down to really what the council outcomes are, funding and budget. So it might be that when you get to your next annual plan budget process that this is a matter that gets reviewed as part of that debate.
And that could be explored further in a report back to a new council? Both of those options along together?
Yes, we could, Councillor, have a look into what a combination of those options may look like in discussion with some of the community leaders. There is a fear that if we go for a community-based committee option and they're not a part of it, then potentially their voices may be not as loud as they are now or not as valued as they are now, because the community-based committees would be more valued. So I think that relationship would be incredibly important, and we would use the resource, you know, requested within option 1 or 2 to support that and understand how we can leverage those connections to ensure that nobody's voice, nobody feels like their voice isn't heard.
And through that, is there then the opportunity to bring other leaders up to support the now community leaders and the community house leaders that you've identified, that you've also said are feeling quite stretched? Yeah,
I guess that comes down to funding, and we all know there's a limited pool, and so whether they've got the funding or the ability to bring more people up, and some of our centres have more capacity for that than others, and some are newer than others, so that dynamic would probably need to be explored over a period of time, and I probably couldn't answer that.
Okay.
I guess though, with legitimate pathways,
going for questions,
could
because
there
we're getting a
be,
bit leading here.
With legitimate pathways, could there be the opportunity to be seen
been
for?
Answered, Maxine.
Yeah.
That question has been answered, so you're leading that into almost into debate.
Thank you.
But thank you, Councillor Bunting, and then Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. Here's a slightly left of centre one. Later in the agenda today, Mish should be aware of this, item 14 in our reform response program. In our submission to the future of local government, one of our points on page 156 seems reasonably presumptive. Are you aware of this? Council advocates for changes in practice and legislation to make it easier to create community committees or specific topic-focused community structures, and to encourage the community to participate in these, provide for options for payment for external parties on committees. Are you aware of that? Like, have we already made this decision? Or? Page 156, bullet point 3. It just seems that that's a wee bit presumptuous.
Well, I guess that's a future item, and we can bring it up at that point. But I get your point. It does speak to the same issue.
It does, yeah, it does speak to the same issue, I guess. One of the things that we note in this report on the community-based committees is that at some point in time, the reform, and probably obviously the most imminent one is the Three Waters reform, will have an impact on every aspect of our business, including our governance, and how we how that's shaped once the reform goes through, assuming that it does in the shape that's proposed at the moment.
Okay.
And I think that's probably best left for a wider debate at the next item,
Councillor Bunting, any other questions?
No, I'll bring it to the next item then and have
Councillor Wilson, then O'Leary, and then Nigel Rove, and then we're going to take a break to get fresh mind.
Yeah, look, thanks, Mayor Paul. These are the couple of questions that I had from my original attempt. The two outstanding ones for me was actually to the Chief Executive. And Lance, we currently spend $102 million a year in payroll.
Councillor Wilson, sorry to interrupt you, and it may be that David can answer this question, but Lance has just stepped out of the room, so he won't be able to answer your question. Do you want to hold it, or do you want to ask it in...
Look, David's very good. He'll have an answer.
There you go. Carry on.
I might not agree with his answer, but he's always very competent.
How about I just go yes?
We spent $102 million in payroll. Here we go again, talking about a trial, but adding 2.5 FTEs. Surely, in an organisation of our scale and size, for a trial, surely we can manage to provide the staff at no new expenditure. After all, this is a trial, and it's supposed to be a community-driven initiative.
Could it be done within current resources? I'm paraphrasing the question.
Yeah, we've said no in the staff report. We've said that it would take additional resources. If we were to continue what we're currently managing in terms of our work program, this would be an addition. Bearing in mind, whilst we have the salary amount that you said, Councillor Wilson, we have significant vacancies, and we have a post-COVID avalanche of things that we're dealing with. So we're just being honest and putting on the table that if we want staff to be dedicated for this purpose, we would need to recruit those staff.
And I guess, all right, my second question back to the staff report writers is in light of the fact that this is supposed to be a community-driven attempt to generate more engagement and participation, have we asked what the community houses could do with half the amount of funding we're suggesting allocating to staff for them to provide the administrational expertise? Because we're not good at Hamilton City Council at doing things cost effectively. Have we gone out and asked what they in the community could do for the sorts of money that we're talking about here? Because I get what Angela's trying to do. I'm just astonished at the quantum.
Helen, do you want to have a stab at that in terms of your lead in this portfolio, or...?
I might start and then Helen.
Okay, Brendan, thank you.
So I think, excuse me, that would form part of the report that would come back if options 1 or 2 would be put forward by this council, that to sort out the detail. The purpose, I suppose, of this report was set out the actual process of how it would be done, and then those more detailed discussions as to who would do what could follow that. The financial estimates there are on the more conservative end, as mentioned, and that was just to help inform the discussion.
So, final question, in light of the fact that this is simply a recommendation to the next incoming council, in light of the fact you have some additional work to do to formulate this further, are we not best to simply remove these conservative quantums and say staff go out and engage with the two community areas and come up with an actual true indication, preferably one not staffed by Hamilton City Council at the rates we charge.
I think that's the intention of this report, that would be the decision of this council to ask for a more detailed report to come back to the incoming council. We were conscious that we didn't want to leave just financial considerations blank and just to provide some information so that there's a ballpark figure for this council to consider when they're looking at the different options.
Okay.
Well, with the mover of the motion, Angela, would you consider adding a line about just trying to, I'm struggling for the right words, but maybe I could message you, just about that staff come back with suggestions of actual costs, and passing this motion doesn't commit council to any sort of financial obligation.
Yep, very happy to you do something about that.
Okay, we're going to have a break soon.
Yeah, we'll
so
work in the break.
Let's work that
send
out.
you it.
Then, last question on the list. I shouldn't have said that because probably somebody will pop up with another one now. But Councillor Naidoo-Rowe.
Thank you. One question relating to something Councillor Ryan talked about in terms of including other groups, not just community houses. Because I did see in option 3, it says working with other community organisations, I think was the wording. So would option 3 include other groups apart from community houses? Like, can it incorporate the sports groups, the youth groups, everyone else?
I guess through, if we are supported to go and investigate that further, that is one of the elements that we can look into as to, who is interested in being a part of an enhanced version and supporting that. Again, I think we can connect people up to a central location from these different groups, and part of that comes down to marketing and supporting the connection and building of those relationships. So without a doubt that can be considered.
So if you are Joe Public, is there an avenue for you to still be involved without belonging to a community house, for example?
We'd like to think that this enhanced version could include that, but it would still require coming together to a central point. Yeah.
Okay, and last question in terms of timeline, if with whichever option, when would it actually start? Because I know there's a whole lot of work and next council to decide, and so are we years away or months away?
Attachment 3 in the report sets out a proposed timeline there in some detail. So perhaps rather optimistically, but the intention is that they would, whatever of those options 1, 2 or 3 that are chosen, that they would start this financial year.
Okay, and how would that tie in with probably next item, but because we're talking local government reform and things might change anyway, how does that tie in? Are we doing a whole lot of work for nothing?
It's a kind of gauging what the future's going to be, which is probably beyond my skill set. But I think it's fair to say, at least on the future of local government review, that the indications that have come from that is very much more a community-based, not decision-making as such, but having a far stronger community-based involvement in a local government framework. What that's going to look like, we don't know at this stage.
So technically we could just wait and this could happen anyway?
Could do, but I suppose devil's advocate is that going down this route would be in line with the indications that have come from them, and it's I don't think there would be anything that would require, and I can be corrected here, but would require a complete about turn from a proposed trial at least.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, everyone. We are going to take a break now until 25 past. because we've sat for a long time. And then we'll come back to debate. Thanks. They would. Welcome back, everyone. Councillors, staff, sorry Chris, we're just about to start, long day. Just before we do start on this, I'm just going to ask Lance, with your leave, because we have a firm close time today, whether when we come back for lunch, which I intend to take at 1 o'clock or thereabouts, could we do the chief executive item after lunch, so that it's, because that has to be done today. So the last thing I want to do is get to the end of the day and then feel pressured to try and get that item through. Does that fit with you?
Fits with me, but I'm not sure why it was at 4 p.m. so that Greg Timms could.
I'll contact Greg Timms
Yeah.
now and see.
Yes, if he can, that would be really good, because we are really going to be up against it otherwise, aren't we? All right, brilliant. Pardon? Oh, shh. Shh. Terrible. I should have an eject button for people who talk like that, honestly, because you're going to jinx it. All right, so we have had the questions. Are there any further questions on this matter now that we've had a break and you may have had conversations? If not, we are going to go to the recommendations, of which there are 2 at the moment, which may well change when we see what's what. Can we put them up, please, Amy? So that's the motion. And so I have a question for the mover that I did field a little bit over tea break, was if we could have an additional one in the motion that notes that work to strengthen the community organisations and community houses will also be done in tandem with this work and costed for the next phase of our discussion. So it's kind of becomes a little bit of a blend of option 1 and option 3, in that we also note that there will be further development of the community houses and key community organisations. I could get some help from staff on this if the wording's not quite right. That will also be costed out for council's consideration in the new term, so that we get a blended option with full prices. And then we can, because, as a new council is going to make this decision anyway, and so that will enable us to pick up that. And Helen, do you see what I'm saying?
Well, you probably just want after that bit is add in to offer enhanced support to existing community-based organisations.
Yeah.
And to.
And then I'll ask Ewan whether he's happy with that, because we can then remove our. So Ewan, what I'm asking Angela if she will consider is to have an and, given that we still need the financials to go hand in hand with this, as we've all agreed. And then we don't need to have number 3, because the intent is picked up in number 1, and both of them will be costed. Are you comfortable with that?
Yeah, I am.
All right.
Yep.
Angela?
I also see Angela added the other part regarding the quantum, which I was happy with. So thanks, Angela.
Okay, so let's just take a second, councillors, just to get that right, and then there may be just one motion to debate.
And if you can increase the font.
Oh, they're still typing, they'll come to it. It's very early in the day for that. Okay, are we there, Angela? Are you happy with that? Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate your inclusion of our thinking in that as well. So I think we've come together nicely. I appreciate that. The amendment can be removed, and we are moving on this one. So are there any questions? Anybody doesn't understand that or has a question?
is actually saying that staff go out and talk to community-based organisations and offer them help already? Is
As
that
part
right?
of the same work, though, it's to be included so that staff will go and look at the two committees, plus look at a model which enhances the community groups to be involved and come back with the costings. That's the intent anyway. That's our intent, isn't it, Ewan?
You could add in the words after request that as part of this work from a staff.
Yeah, does that clarify?
Yeah, it does, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I thought that was just going to race ahead.
You happy with that, Angela? Okay, good. Excellent. All right, we will go into debate, and Angela is the mover, so.
Yep, thank you. Look, thanks everyone, really great questions, and thanks again to the staff for a really detailed and informative report. A word of caution, we do need to show some consistency here, and as Councillor Bunting pointed out, we've included in our very own submission that's going to be discussed soon, on the local government reform, an actual request to government to change the legislation to allow community committees to be developed and also to be remunerated. But we also use the very fact of community committees in that we were looking at them recently with the appeal on our representation review. And I believe that the decision from the Commissioner was favourable to Hamilton City Council in part because of the fact that we said we were going to be using and looking at community committees. So we need to apply some consistency. Look, I think if we do what we've always done, we'll get what we've always got. And the purpose, I feel, was a little bit lost in translation from the original proposal, but we've teased things out today. This was always about grassroots issues and reaching into the community where we've lost touch. When I think of the first time I started on council, I could always get to Scone Wednesday at Puketi House. I could always get to every single network meeting at community houses. There was that time. But we're not connected anymore to those grassroots community channels, not because we don't want to, we do, simply because the city has grown and along with it the workload of councillors around the table. This proposal is about reaching into the community that we serve, and it's about plugging that gap for us. People are struggling out there, and people have struggled for the last 3 years, particularly with this pandemic. And we've seen in the feedback from this communication that we did with stakeholders that there is indeed a gap. And I think it's up to us as elected member leaders of the community to come up with a good solution. And I really feel that community committees will be that. It is a trial, that enables us to be leaders ahead of the local government review and to work through things as they come up. Look, I know about half a dozen members of local community boards in Auckland, and I know that the work they do, and it's real grassroots stuff. It's not the stuff that we deal with on a day-to-day basis in the chamber, which is big, strategic, technical and complex issues, and that's right for a council of a district as large and as growing as ours. And I also met at a Women in Politics event last week, a woman who sits on the Cambridge local board, and she was lobbying and talking at that grassroots level that we just simply don't have capacity and resource to be able to do. And as Hamilton grows even faster and wider, we're going to be less and less able to plug that gap and reach into our communities. So really appreciate everybody's questions and times today, and I hope that you will support the motion in front of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Van Oosten, and then Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. Look, firstly, thank you to Councillor Angela for right at the outset being a real champion for the community committees. It's something that I'm also very passionate about, and having come from a movement where communities of interest is supported, it really does show that there are, if the structures are set up well, there are some great outcomes that can be achieved. also, when they're done well, it enables the real local issues to be bubbling up, to be resolved at the point where they are in the community, that solutions are able to be adapted to different communities and resolved at the very earliest. Participation has always been really important to me, and there's nothing better than having some agency in order to be able to show members of the public that they can have a real voice in the solutions that are coming through. And that can't be simply talked away through a lack of financial backing from this council. It's really important that we put the appropriate budget in place to support that. It not only helps to build the trust and confidence in this council through our community, but through that will improve civic interest, I believe, in our community. I'd like to thank also Mayor Paula for working really collaboratively to make sure that this motion is as wide as possible, because for me it was never one or the other, but and which is critically important, because of course we want to strengthen the communities, houses, community groups that are out there to be able to have a voice through council that isn't just 3 minutes at the top of the table at our meetings. There's more discussion that needs to go on around that as well. There is a real desire, not just in the room today, but in the wider community, for agency for localism, and that as Councillor Mark has pointed out in our submission to the future of local government, is a key point that we make, being that our community committees be supported and that local government empower those communities. So I'm more than happy to be sponsoring this as well, and ask for your support also. Kia ora.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Paula, and my thanks goes to my good friend, Councillor Angela, for passionately working her way through this and finding some words that gets buy-in from, I hope, the whole chamber. Look, I don't think anybody disagrees about the importance of having a local voice over local issues. At the heart of the good democracy is local government participation, and I'm comfortable that this will hopefully lead to that outcome. But I also think the community expects fiscal responsibility and sensible spending, and I'm not convinced that council's normal solution of, yeah, here's an idea and here's our mega budget, and yes, we need 2 new or additional FTEs to make this happen. I don't believe that's the right solution. So I think what the motion achieves today is enabling staff to go out, and I'm encouraging them to test with the community what the community solution could be, because I'm sure people, community advocates like, Councillor Dave McPherson in the past would probably have been able to put together the types of things we need for a lot less than the sort of money that the report was indicating. So I appreciate this next step. I also think local government, as elected members, as we go forward, we may have to be comfortable in delegating some areas of decision-making to these local committees, because there's nothing more frustrating than if the community engages but have nothing to engage over and feel like their voice isn't being heard. So I'm really pleased in the next step. I look forward to getting much clearer financial details, as I do not support this next move of better engagement needing to cost the ratepayers hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars over a 10-year long-term plan period, which is what's being outlined here. I'm looking for more fiscally responsible outcomes. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bunting.
Thank you, Mayor Paula. Yeah, look, I will support it, because, but I'll be interested in debating it further down the track. I will support it largely because it's just a proposal to the new council. The cost has been pulled out of it. I mean, the irony of this hasn't escaped me in that it's taking us months and months and months and months and months and months and months to come up with a voluntary community group, whereas we managed to get STV, Māori seats, Māngai Māori in like that, which seemed to be, it just strikes me that it just seems a little bit ironic. Look, I want to hear from the people we're not hearing from already, quite frankly. And I am worried about the fact that, look, I know Community Waikato, Western Community Centre, Kote Pacifica, Te Whare Aotearoa, etc., right down to the 13 groups on a first-name basis already. We're already hearing from these people. I want to reach the people in the House who are just too darn busy to go to a committee room and sit around a table and form a committee unpaid. They are already there. They are already contributing to the residents' pages on Facebook. These are the new community committees. But unfortunately, I mean, and I think they're doing the right thing, but our comms team don't engage with them directly. And I think maybe we should. That's where the oil is. That's where we find out where these issues are. People are doing it from their own homes now, rather than turning up at halls and sitting around a trestle table with a community, so with a committee. So I think, there is a certain element of, look, the 70s called and they want their idea back in this, but I'm prepared to go out in a gesture of goodwill to say, look, we are trying to engage more. I think the answer may come back that, hey, let's not do a thing, but at least we're progressing that work. Yeah, and I just will reinforce that, we already, I mean, who here doesn't know Ray Mudford's name? Who here doesn't know Kelly Pike's name? Who here doesn't know these people who are already contributing? The little thing that we constantly come back to is saying we only give them 3 minutes in a submission is perhaps a little bit misleading, because we do. I think this group of people in particular, as we've seen with our cycle advocacy groups lately, we do give them any time we possibly can and we respond to them really, really well. So there is a lot of good work already going on. I wonder if another committee is the right thing to do, but I'll support it going through at this point.
Thank you. Councillor Hamilton.
Thanks, Chair. I'm probably similar to Mark, but I'll probably take it a little bit further. Kudos to you, Councillor Angela, and for putting this together. And I appreciate where you're coming from with it. For me today, it just feels a little bit of an overreach. If I go back a little bit in time with, Andy Mannering's team, and a few years ago, we were resourcing up the community development team. We were giving them staff to go into those community centres and broker that gap. And all of a sudden, 3 years later, we've forgotten about that. They're now part of the BAU, and we're doing another thing where we're trying to broker that communication and that democracy. So it just becomes another layer onto council. And I appreciate what Councillor Ewan's trying to do, but again, I think by signing this off today, we're effectively just further down the path on that. Dr. Bev Gattenby wrote a great report 2 or 3 years ago, which council adopted and resourced up its community development team. And I think there's plenty of people and staff, good staff, that are doing this job, doing the mahi, getting the conversation happening. And I think Mark spoke to the individuals involved quite well. But we only need to look at Magical Bridge this morning. They organically got themselves together and they got in front of council. We got the likes of Eastlink, Awanui, Momentum, Toti, Mesh. These groups are able to advocate when they need to, and I think this is unfortunately just another layer of bureaucracy which I just can't support today.
Thank you. Councillor McPherson.
Thanks. Unlike Councillor Hamilton, I think that we're underreaching by what we're, in other words, being very modest by what we're asking for here. Councillor Ryan talked about the groups that are able to come and present to council and get some progress on specific projects. And when you look at those groups, they're almost all quite well resourced, very well connected into the community. In fact, often members of the same political party as and groups of friends as some of the people around. You know, when you're in the Old Boys network, to use a phrase, it's very easy to get other members of the Old Boys network to back you. What we're talking about here is actually more of the people that Councillor Bunting are talking about, the social media warriors, but there are many of them in the community that don't actually go on social media as well. So I think that's only one part of that particular coin, Councillor Bunty. There's another thing that Angela mentioned that made me chuckle about not being able to get to Scone Wednesday. I think Councillor Bunting and myself are both very happy that we haven't been to Scone Wednesday in recent times, because the scones are so nice, we eat too damn many of them. But the point, however, is well made, that it has become harder to connect with those less formal elements within the community, and what Angela and Maxine are talking about doing here, and agree with Councillor Wilson as well, is trying to open up those channels of communication with the people that don't attend and make well-resourced submissions to council, people that may occasionally go on social media or may complain to their friends at the park one day about a problem that they've seen but they don't know where to go. There's all sorts of issues like that. I've been on a community board myself in the past in a small centre that operated much more like a community committee. It had bugger all authority other than to decide, as I mentioned before, where the next footpath improvements should go and argue for speed limits that Waka Kotahi or their forerunner would always turn down. So, that's about all it could do, but it was a good forum, and you can get lots of members of the public to come along to those sorts of forums if you do things right. I've seen recently one in operation in the Dunedin area where it actually does the combination that with what Councillor Bunting's talking about. They're quite active in a physical sense, but they're also quite active in a social media sense, and the council down there is listening to both of those channels, the personal one and the social media one, and they're working in this synchronisation. So I think some solutions like that might be quite good in the future. So I support Angela's and Maxine's initiative here. Like Councillor Wilson's mentioned, the costs seem high, and I've offered to do it for about a third the price.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Taylor.
Thanks, Mayor Southgate. Yeah, look, I've thought about this quite a lot over the last 6 months or so, and my previous position was concern about being overly bureaucratic, cost, just complicating things too much. But I actually think I support this, and I'll tell you why. I actually think the value of listening is underrated, and the longer you're a politician, the more you sometimes underrate it. I think I've noticed my own common sense barbecues that when I just shut up and listen for 2 hours, I get a lot more out of it. And there's a lot of local grassroots issues which you can come back and close the loop on, and so I think that's really influenced me. And I think as a council, Angela, who I thank very much for this, well done again, Angela, for leading this, referred to the fact that we do a lot of high-level strategic thinking. There's massive reforms on the way which we are trying to deal with. We have to be careful that we still engage our residents, even though we're dealing with these things. And I will just bring it up very briefly, but I think with Three Waters we did drop the ball a little bit there, because we were trying to respond to the government, and
that's for next discussion. It's off topic. Can we carry on with this one, please?
It's about engagement and consultation with the community, Mayor Southgate. And on that particular one, we have ended up giving them 2 weeks to consult, when we've consulted on dog areas and reclassification of Fairfield Park for twice that amount. So that is not a good outcome for our residents, which is what I'm saying. And so I think we need to make sure we don't get bogged down in these things and forget what we're about and shut people out. we need to keep listening, but we need to keep talking, and don't feel that we are the ones who can respond to these things without actually going to our people when we haven't got all the information. Just say, look, this is what we're dealing with, and I think we need to do more of that. In terms of the way it's done, I'm a fan of organic groups, a bit like what Councillor Hamilton was mentioning. I tend to think when I look at the Dinsdale Community Action Group, that sprung up for a reason. It had a kind of imperative which has driven it, and to me, rather than just going through the community houses as a course of action, I would rather that we respond when there's organic groups that have come for a reason. They want better outcomes for their part of town, like Dinsdale does. So look, I'll be keen to see how this shapes up. I'm certainly really keen to get to a more grassroots level with our community, and I congratulate Councillor O'Leary again. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Naidu-Rauf.
Thank you. Like some of the others, I have been a bit of a yo-yo on this one and not sure which way to go. But my concerns were about duplicating the work that we're doing now, and speaking to the same people who are the loud voices in our community, just through different forums, but hearing the same stories again. The other concern I had was around, if we're having to elect these people onto community boards, then we'll face the same barriers to elections that we do now in terms of candidate standing, and how do we actually encourage people from those diverse communities to stand for election. And then again, the cost, and then we've got local government reform. But I'm going to support this because I want to see what comes of it. I do think there's value in improving the way we engage with the community. I'd like to see, it's crazy because, when you first run for council, you have this idea in your mind that you're going to be so connected to the community, and you're going to be able to hold these, street corner meetings, and just like your common sense barbecue, where you actually get to see people and talk to them. But after almost 3 years, I've worked out that it actually doesn't happen. Because you're just stuck in meetings every day of the week and you lose your connection with the community, and it's quite sad because that's not what we were elected to do. And I'd love to see this community board or community committee sort of structure actually involve the councillors at some point, where it's in our meeting schedule to attend these meetings, so that we are connected to the community just as much as everyone else is. So I'm going to support this and see what happens next. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gallagher.
Yes, I think it's interesting that Jeff talked about his barbecues, and then Bunty talked about the Facebook posts as communication. And what is better about the in-person barbecue model is that you actually have a two-way conversation, whereas Facebook posts, I find you put up a post and then people react, but often the post can be just one side of a story. And I'm being very respectful because, as you know, I love reading all these Facebook posts and the lovely kind words that are said about me and others, and I then have a cup of tea and go to bed. But seriously, what I'm trying to say here is, if I just take two communities, and if we look at our northeast community, the Rotatuna Flagstaff community group, and we have another community which is sort of over in the Norton, Crawshaw, Dinsdale area, and they are very, very diverse communities and diverse journeys. So at the moment they have very hard-working ward councillors, obviously, and I have to say some of the stuff that some of the East Ward councillors have achieved for the North East have been shameless and incredible. Deal's a deal. I mean, that's their job. But it's really important that we get the, if you like, the next layer, and I think the ingredients are there. And I just personally look at Christchurch, which is, land, a contiguous city. But they are full of, they have every part as covered by a community board, and it's a combo of those community boards which are elected and the elected ward councillor. They have single-member wards, etc. I'm not saying we duplicate that, don't get me wrong, but I think what we're saying to the new council is have an open mind, that we can do better. So all we're doing is we're saying to the new, which could be quite a different council to this one, have an open mind. How can we do diversity better and community democracy better without being unduly bureaucratic? So I think this is a really good motion, because I think it actually gives a good steer to the incoming council, and I want to thank the Mayor for her adding to the motion around the, we can look at a couple of models, all right, but actually let's keep developing that deeper relationship with all of our communities. So I think this is a really good motion. We're 180,000 people. We're becoming a bigger city, and we're becoming a much more diverse city. And I think this particular motion, if it's accepted by the new council, takes us further along the way to having better, dare I say it, in an age of huge change, better local democracy.
Councillor Thompson.
Mayor Paula, I'll be supporting the motion. I think that there's no silver bullet to improving participation with council and local democracy, but I think that it is important that we try new things, because without trying anything different, then we're certainly going to have one certain outcome, and that is to get exactly what we're getting at the moment. So I guess, like Kesh, I'll be really interested in the outcome of the pilot. I think that the review is going to be really important in helping us to understand how effective the community-based committees have been in terms of making council decision-making more accessible, having more people feel like they can engage, all of those things that we'll be looking for through this. I do think that, I guess in terms of the costs, we have to look at how we can run these in a cost-effective way, because if you do want to roll them out further into more areas of the city to have that geographical cover, then it's going to close to 400,000 for 2 committees. That will escalate a lot.
I'll do it cheaper.
So I think, if we want to make this something that can be scalable, we do need to have a look at that. But obviously they also need to be resourced to actually have a chance of succeeding in the first place. So I'm looking forward to developing this idea further and seeing what comes of it. Thank you.
Councillor Donovan.
Thank you. I wasn't really going to talk about this, but I've done some thinking, and to use Kesh's line, I was a bit of a yo-yo as well. But I will say from the outset, I'm not going to support the motion, because I listened to what Councillor Ryan said, and I really tend to agree with him. I think that we've got in place, and people have used words like duplication, advocacy groups, all of that sort of thing, which I believe gives us enough good structure to be able to do the things that we're meant to do for our communities. We live in a modern day society now where everything is done more electronically, because we complain about being time-starved and all that kind of thing. The one thing that stood out for me is in that table that showed some feedback from other councils, I didn't see a line that said outstanding success. So I'm not sold on it. I don't see this is really working. This, if it worked, then 67 councils around the country would probably be doing the same thing. I also think the other thing we've got to take into consideration is that the optics on this, from a ratepayer perspective, is that there are going to be a majority of people, and this is my opinion, are going to sit around and say, what the heck are you guys doing? Because it just looks like another misuse of money. So we've got other things in place that I think are working, and can probably work a little bit better with a bit more refinement. And so therefore I've based my decision today on my own argument.
That's a good way to make it. That's good.
Yeah. Go with your own argument. That's a good one. Okay, thank you. I'll just say a few comments. I support anything we can do to strengthen community voice, and I have since the beginning. So my concern was not around 2 committees, 3 committees or anything else. It was how we reach into that wider community and give them the voice. In fact, I'm out and about many evenings of the week and most weekends in community groups that are established. And I often wonder how we can better harness what they're doing. So I'm really delighted that the mover and seconder have incorporated this aspect, because this is really important to me. And I can't share the view about community houses having no place in particular, but because I've been out to 3 recently, I've seen the upgrade of Te Papanui Enderley House, and wow, it's just a big wow, and the impact that's having on the community is beyond measure. So much going on there, from homework to after-school programs, holiday programs, health screening, and I can go on and on and on. And it's the same with the Puketi Community House, which we are investing time and effort in to help them to redevelop and get more modern with the way that they run their community houses, and more relevant to their communities. And I really, really do support that. I just make a note that we should be proud of what we have achieved in terms of lifting consultation. 160% up on the LTP is no mean feat, and I thank staff for the efforts that they did to enable more people to be involved in our LTP. But are we there yet? Probably not. It'll be interesting in the upcoming elections to see just what percentage of people do engage with us through the election process. I have to commend governance, and particularly Becca from previous, for the great work that she did in harnessing our rangatahi, our youth voice. We actually now, because of that work, are doing a lot more work in schools and youth organisations around civics. So there are 3 or 4 schools that are regularly reaching out. I had 2 emails yesterday from students at a school who are asking me to complete a questionnaire on their behalf for their social studies. And it's relevant stuff. And I really love that they do that. Not that I have a lot of time to sit down and do that, but I do love that they feel they can reach out to the mayor and ask her to participate in some work that they're doing in their school. And just the last point I want to make is that I absolutely 100% support the comments around digital engagement. We are in a modern world. Mark's absolutely right. This is where in fact, it's a lot where I get a lot of my intelligence from. This pothole, this tree, this whatever in the local area, this water main's broken. I see it first on those pages. We must look to LGNZ to push for strengthening the right of people to have a submission formally recognised when it's done electronically. And that is not the case at the moment. And that is certainly something I have my eye on going into the future. How do we make it relevant to submit digitally, rather than just being a little bit of extra information on the side and not a formal submission? So, yep, good work. Thank you, Angela. Nice reply.
Yeah, thank you. A couple of responses. Councillor Kesh reminded me of something that happens every 3 years, and that's how much actually I enjoy election time and campaigning, because you actually get the time to go to these places and talk to people at a grassroots level. And yes, they do. And every single time I've been so lucky to be re-elected, I've come back with a list from those conversations. Councillor Ewan again said the perfect phrase about having a local voice over local issues, and that's what this is about. I've mentioned in the past that last year I attended the best conference ever, and it was a virtual conference with Infrastructure New Zealand, and there was a professor from Oxford University who talked about, he was an economic a global economic professor, and he talked about the damages but the opportunities that a pandemic can cause, and he said more than ever before is the need for local when a world goes into a pandemic, and he said that will just continue now because pandemics and things like COVID-19 will probably never stop. Councillor Ryan said we're not talked about brokering the same relationships with the same people, but that's not what this is about. We've acknowledged how fast this city is growing, and we've heavily invested in that, in our growth areas, in our infrastructure. Some members have also expressed that our boundaries should be bigger. With a bigger boundary would mean more people, more complex issues for us to deal with around the table. So we need to invest in our democracy, and that's what this is. Councillor Kesh also talked about her concern of whether we're duplicating the work that we're duplicating. My question would be, how much work have we done in this chamber this term on high-level complex strategic work compared to how much work we have done on street lighting issues, on potholes or on broken playground equipment? And those are the issues that this proposal will bring to us. Councillor Donovan said, people might think, what the heck are we doing? We are fixing democracy. We've heard so many times, and he hasn't been here long enough, council never listens. That's because we're at such a high level and we've got so many complex issues. This is a way council will listen. And finally, the Deputy Mayor also summed it up well, and he said when he shuts up and listens, he learns a lot. That's also what this is about. I think I paraphrased that wrong. When we shut up and listen, we will learn a lot as well. And finally, look, I've always pushed for more ways for council to listen to the people it represents. I introduced webcams. I introduced public forum. I've always pushed for toolboxes for residents and the people that we represent in our community for us to shut up and listen to them. So this is another step towards that. Thank you.
Thank you. We will go to the vote. Do we want to do it on the board? No, we'll do it all in favour. Raise your hand. But keep it up a little bit so we can count. And against, and against, and against, Martin, against. Okay.
The motion is carried,
No, he had
noting
his hand
Councillor
still up.
Hamilton and Councillor Donovan are dissenting.
Okay, so thank you. That brings us on to the next item, which is the reform response. And just to note, councillors, on this, I have an amendment to the recommendation. Oh no, I have a motion instead of the recommendation because nobody's put the recommendation, which is to do with D. There it is. D. So just so you know, and I might, because we'll have lots of questions, so just so you know, what that's aiming to achieve, and I understand from staff we do have time, is that we're not approving, we're noting, and we're not approving. We're taking the approving out of. Note the staff recommendation and gather feedback on tranche one, because I understand. Feedback from who? Feedback from council, and then we do have the hearings. So this is just basically not going ahead of the hearings with our not formally approve it at this point in time. I understand that there is time for that. But staff will come up to present on this item, right? Who's presenting on this item?
Mayor Southgate, I will introduce the report.
Excellent. I was looking for you, Sean.
Yeah, sorry, I've got a socially unacceptable cold, which means I can't come into the chamber.
Okay.
Are you happy with me to take it?
Yeah. So I'm just trying to note the recommendation and gather feedback because we have public hearings coming up. So that's my intent. So if I haven't got the words right, let me know. Off you go, Sean.
Thank you, Mayor Southgate. So with the reform report, there are essentially three sets of recommendations. One is relating to the future for local government submission. One is around the Better Off funding, and one is around the political advocacy on Three Waters. So my suggestion is that we deal with those things separately in terms of how we kind of how you debate those. If you're comfortable with that, and we can take the Future for Local Government submission first, if you like, and I can answer questions on that.
Yeah.
And then Andrew and Stephen are available to talk through the water-related aspects.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
I'm conscious of the discussion around the Chair's report and altering stuff, and the point that Councillor Dave brought up about you can't alter a report once it's written, etc. And
No, I'm altering a recommendation. That's what
so I'm interested because there's a few things in the report that I'm not happy with.
Okay.
And I'd like to constructively work through so that I can support it. So can you give me some guidance so I don't fire off down this highly entertaining yet useless line?
Well, my view is that staff are proposing a report, and it is our job to question and consider that. So you have every right to question parts of the report and get a clear answer from staff. That's how I read it, Lance.
Yeah, that's fine.
But if there's stuff that we can't support it because there's certain bits in it,
then we either negotiate some changes, or we
we can do that.
or we or we make, well, you know, the staff report is the staff report, but we can make recommendations that reflect our changes.
Yeah, okay. That's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
Is that all right?
Yeah, that clears it up for me. Thanks.
Have I got that correct now?
Is this to the submission?
Yeah, to the submission. We can make changes to the submission. The report is the report. You don't have to agree with it all. So I think Sean's idea is actually a good one. If we start, because there's so much in here, it's quite a huge item when you start drilling into it. And let's go with the draft, the attachment 1, the submission on future local government.
And in Mayor Southgate, can I also just note that so draft 1 was originally included in the agenda and circulated for elected member feedback. And then that feedback has been incorporated into draft 2, which is attached at the end of the agenda. So on page
356, we're told.
Yeah, perfect.
I just got to find page.
And so the changes that have been made are highlighted in yellow. So the draft was distributed on the 10th of June, and then various elected members fed back into that. And then this is the updated draft with the additions highlighted in yellow.
Okay, thank you. All right, so do you want to take questions on that part, Sean?
So questions. Yeah, happy to take questions on that future local government submission.
Okay. I think we've got Councillor Bunting first up.
Thank you. Yeah, I've just got a few, and there are only a few. Page 367, bullet point number 4. Council also suggests the consideration of lowering the voting age to 16. I may have missed a briefing on that, but I don't recall a resolution. That's a pretty strong recommendation, and I personally don't agree with it.
367.
367, Dave.
It's a remit that's been. James isn't here because he's not well, but it was a remit. It was the only discussion I think we've had is in respect to remits. There was a remit put up, but we haven't agreed to that. We haven't discussed it. In fact, remits are coming up. Pardon? Didn't we agree to support the remit for that? I can't remember.
I don't recall doing that.
Not officially, we didn't, but we had a discussion about it, which you may have missed then.
But it was through an email, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Any objection?
That's right. All the remits were circulated.
Yeah,
Thank you, Maxine. So all the remits were circulated for comment. If you have comments now, of course, in the debate we can incorporate those, or you can ask staff to. We can discuss elements.
Yeah,
I'm
trying to work out my options because I wouldn't be comfortable supporting this without that resolution because I think it's pretty significant
and we
and major.
can separate some parts out like that.
But I appreciate that I'm not everyone shares that view either. So I'm trying to work out how we can get to a point.
Yeah. So what I think you could do is take that element of the discussion out in a separate motion.
Yep.
So that you do not support, unless everybody's in agreement with that. But yeah, we can do that. So you've got some questions on it, or you just want to make?
I was just wondering when we decided we'd do it, when we'd agree to it, and we would say that we did it by email.
It was part of the remit discussion, which was all circulated.
Yeah. This is the LGNZ one.
Yeah. Which
Yeah.
we come to, what item do we come to, remits? So I'm just,
19.
so item 19 is when we do the remits. I wonder, therefore, if the cleanest way might be to remove any, to not include in our local government submission any reference to the age of voting.
Yeah.
And discuss it in item 19 when we come to the remits.
Happy to have the discussion, but that's bang on, I think. You've achieved it there.
I'm trying to find a clean way of doing this.
Yeah,
so has anybody got any other ideas to that?
I'd like to pull it out too. Otherwise, we're forced to support
Let's
the whole
pull it
government.
outside. Pull it outside. Let's talk about that.
Great.
And actually, we may well be able to get our thinking across that during the break. But
Yeah, cool. Okay, thank you.
Sean, there's no issue with separating it out.
Anything about a remit for the 16-year-old voting age. It's looking here, it's not in the list of the 5 remits up for discussion.
I don't know, James circulated the remits.
So we're all a bit vague on this one, eh?
Well, can we find out about that? We'll set that one aside over lunch and find out what we need to find out.
Yeah, because it's worthy of a good
James
discussion.
is probably online, but of course he's very unwell.
Yeah.
And I can't recall, I know that we agreed to put all the remits that came in on time out to you guys. Eh?
It wasn't a remit, it was discussed when we were all online at
Yeah.
some point during a briefing or where Julie Clausen was updating us on, and it was just captured as 1 or 2 elected members were interested, that's all.
Yeah.
And if we don't want it, we just take it out.
Yeah. I think that would be neater.
So James also
There
is
was
not aware of any remit.
There was
so
no
that you're right.
formality around it
Okay,
at
so
all.
it must have come up. I know it's been talked about in the local government circles, but other than that,
I remember the Zoom call we all had with, with the panel.
Yeah.
I remember what I had.
We have
in
so
mind.
many briefings, Zoom calls at the moment. I can't which what was within what.
You go a bit cross-eyed. eh?
Anyhow,
Okay.
we're going to set it aside.
Thank
so
you.
We're not. This,
I wonder.
recommendation does not include the voting age at this point in time.
Happy with that. Thank you. Page 365. Just noticed that we've got in there about our Māngai Māori model, which is cool, but it kind of makes it look like it's permanent, and that is up for review in the next term. So I wonder if we shouldn't include a line there so we don't give the impression that it's a permanent arrangement, because we've got to have that discussion in the next term.
Just saying that, noting the new triennium, that'll be discussed as part of the...
Yes, exactly. Yeah. I think it shows a more accurate position. So if we could.
Right page here.
That's on page 365, second bullet point down.
Okay, cool.
Cool, thank you. And I just wonder, with due deference to my good friend, the Deputy Mayor, and the former Deputy Mayor, Martin, Councillor Martin, there's a note in here on note 51, page 366, that we're... Yeah, doing well, eh?
Impressive.
That we're encouraging more innovative ways of community voice, such as Zoom chat rooms and post-it note sessions. And I just wonder how...
I'm with you there, buddy.
Yeah, I just... And I just wanted to see Councillor Gallagher's face when he saw that in there. So perhaps post-it notes can come out if anyone feels strongly about it.
Please.
Yeah.
We add in that as part of the induction for the new members of council, that they have a compulsory watching of the video movie called Groundhog Day.
Yeah.
So that would help them.
Yep. That's the only questions I had on that, so thank you. I'd be happy if that other one was taken out and we tweaked
Vaguely questions, but we'll go there.
Just for clarity, can I just clarify that point, please?
Yes, certainly.
So removing reference to some of the specific types of feedback.
Yeah.
I just want to check, is the general point that alternative ways for elected members to hear community voices, is that
happy with
concept still valid?
Happy with that, Sean. I just thought post-it notes was worthy chortle.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you. That's it for me. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else got any questions on local government reform submission? Because I want to make sure that you're happy with it before we move it. I'm going to move it and then have people say I didn't agree. Councillor Martin.
I just noted you've got the cycle of a 4-year term. I'm a sceptic of that. But I think in the end, any submission, you're not going to, you're not going to agree with everything. So obviously with the qualification, if there's a consensus that you want the discussion, then that's a discussion to be had. And I think a lot of these things, when we come to discuss the 16-year one later on, so it's through the chair, we don't personally have to agree with,
No.
albeit major victories remove post-it notes, and I'll accept that as a major move on this submission. Thank you.
Yeah, and just to note that the last LGNZ conference, and I have noted it for LGNZ to comment on in their report at this conference, was 100% unanimous decision to push on government for 4-year terms from the membership at that time. I have asked what's happened to that and could we have an update, because those updates go to National Council, and I've said they should go to the membership of Local Government New Zealand in the Broad at the conference, at the AGM. All right, so any other questions on the, no, do we want to move that be that part of the recommendation and get that out of the way then? Can we see it? Do you feel disconnected, Sean? It's hard being the only one at home, isn't it?
It doesn't, right.
So notes the approved. Oh yeah, Ewan is, sorry. I always find that when the majority's in the room and you're the minority at home, it's a little bit more tricky. So notes the approved submission for future. No, they'll be subject to agreed changes. It's just coming. Coming. Okay. All right. I seem to have moved, but there you go. I hadn't, but I will.
Do you need C, Amy?
And C, we just need C up.
C's just saying we're going to send it by tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
Today?
Tomorrow?
Tomorrow, yeah.
Are you putting C up? A, B and C? I do want to make sure everybody's clapped eyes on it, because nothing's worse than saying I didn't agree to it. Okay, I've moved by all the looks of things, and Councillor Van Oosten second. Is there any debate on this? Councillor Bunting, do you want to debate anything on this, given the questions you raised? I'm the mover. I'll just say one very short thing. Thank you to the staff for the work, and I absolutely support Martin's comments 100%. When you get a document this long on something coming up in the, a big change, you're not going to get 100% agreement on the words within it. But I think the intent of this is quite clear and very well done. So thanks to the team, Sean, for putting this together. That's my debate. There you go. Anybody else want one? Oh, all of a sudden. Councillor O'Leary.
I'll be really brief, and I've said this at every opportunity. I really want to thank Julie Clausen for this. I try and keep up with all of this kind of stuff, and as you all know, I don't have much of a life, so I read everything. And this one moved really quickly, and I wasn't able to catch up and read it. And she did, I think, a brilliant job on all of those drop-in sessions. I think most of them were actually, or all of them were online, and of keeping the real key issues up front so that we have had meaningful submission. And when I look through it, I can see every elected member in this room's comments and feedback and information and suggestions and ideas there. So I think she's done a great job. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bunting.
Yes, indeed. Like Councillor Angela said, well done, staff. It's pretty good considering the difficulty of getting this all together. But I don't resign from the fact that this is government change, and we need to, as we've seen with Three Waters, we need to make sure that our ducks are in a row, because otherwise we find ourselves committing to stuff here that we sort of slipped by. So that's kind of cool. And I will note, as a note of comedy, point 65, I got very, very excited on page 162. I thought, cool, we're going to be funding pools. But then it was funding pools. So it was quite a different, yeah. Darn it, my excitement was short-lived. So
Sorry to burst your bubble.
Yeah.
Councillor Van Oosten.
Thank you. Whilst this hasn't taken up much time in this meeting, I'd like us to note that there has been quite a process that's gone before this, and that, as Councillor Angela has said, has been every opportunity for each of us to be involved in that conversation, also including a session with the panel, and at which point we were all able to express our ideas and give them our thoughts. This is still only part way through the process, and further consideration of all of these submissions will be given before a final outcome is known, which is more than 12 months away. So I am sure, though, that our points are considered along with others, and that the kinds of things that we've raised will not be unique when it's looked at in the whole. So thank you to Julie and all of us, really, for our participation through this process and for being available to be able to do that and to give this thinking to it. It's a big piece of work that will have a fundamental impact on our community and the country, I believe. So I'm very connected to it and wish to remain so. Kia ora. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gallagher.
Yeah, compliments to Julie and Clausen in the report. I think by and large, good direction. Some of us can remember the 1989 local government reforms. And obviously we're at a point in our history where potentially what local government looks like is evolving, and irrespective of who is in government in Wellington the next few years, obviously change is coming. I particularly welcome the comments we've made around interaction with central government, both with central government-based agencies. Hopefully those agencies would also match up with our regional structure here, but also better interaction with members of parliament. As a two-way deal, of course, I think it's very important that we absolutely, which we are doing, reach out to local members of parliament, because they are our ambassadors in Wellington, or should be in great degree. So I think those parts of the report are good. I personally am a sceptic in this kind of democracy of a 4-year term, but I'm open-minded. Having said that, if we adopted the British model where you had a rotation, so you have local elections every May, so a quarter of the council comes off and they stand for election every year, that would be good. So you'd have an election season every year. That would appeal to me, but that's another story. But I think the really important thing when we talk about 4-year terms, and even when we talk about the age of franchise down to 16, let's have the conversation. I think that's the critical thing, is this submission and the work that is being done is a conversation that has to be said. And ultimately, the objective must be, how do we put local into local democracy, and how do we actually engage? So this ties in beautifully with the previous discussion we had. We'll always have differences on a number of issues, but how do we strengthen and enhance local government? So I'll be supporting this motion.
Thank you very much. No further debate. I don't really need a right reply, but I'll just say that you just about made my hair stand on end when you talked about every year when it costs.
No, that was just being a little bit
facetious.
A third of you go off every year when we have an election.
Yeah, when you pay tens of thousands of dollars to have a campaign, it'd be great, wouldn't it? Imagine that. All right, time to vote. All in favour, please raise your hand. Opposed? Nobody. Where have we got Ewan?
Yes, the motion is carried unanimously.
Okay, cool. Thank you very much. So, Sean, back to you. Oh, sorry. Okay, not up to you, up to Andrew and Stephen.
So actually over to Andrew.
Okay.
Thank you, Sean. I'll be relatively brief. I'll just speak to the water reform component, in particular the better off funding. So the key decision today in relation to this water reform component is around the Tranche 1 better off funding. So just as a reminder, for Hamilton, the better off fund allocation is 58.61 million, which was set out by government in July 2021. So of that 58 million, 43.93 million is available subject to a future process after 1 July 2024, i.e. Should the reform proceeding entities are established. But Tranche 1, being the difference, 14.65 million, is available this year from government as a Tranche 1 fund. The DIA have provided 2 FAQs, which is part of the report pack. The key message from my reading of the FAQs is that Council's not constrained politically in its views on the reform or select committee processes should it sign up for the Tranche 1 process. I've actually tested that with Tompkins Wake, who confirmed that view. Now, Council has options available to today, and today the timing of this recommendation was actually intended to preserve all feasible options for Council, and so I just note the motion, which I'll come back to. So I guess the key consideration, the first consideration is, does Council actually want to sign this agreement by 30 September 2022, because that's the cut-off date for signing. And by signing, you secure the $14 million and essentially contracts you with this government and successive governments for that funding. And the second part, if you do sign this agreement, the question is, well, do you propose projects now by September 2022? And I'll just note the timeline, which is in paragraph 31, page 138. So there's quite a complex timeline around project proposals between now and September. So the question is, do you propose projects now up until September and go through that process, or do you file a nil project return essentially and propose the projects as part of the 2024 LTP when in theory the full 58 million becomes available? So if I just pause there briefly, that's essentially the staff recommendation, and essentially the motion would take you down that 2024 LTP project consideration path because of the limited time available between now and September to actually work out the projects in detail with Crown Infrastructure Partners and DIA. So the motion is a very viable option for Council in my view.
Sorry, it is. It is.
It
because
is.
It gives
It
us
is. It is. Yeah.
My motion.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. The staff motion, it was about preserving all options for Council. Your motion, Mayor Paula, is equally viable. It's just that all I'm signalling is that project proposals would probably have to shift out to the 2024 LTP process as a consequence.
I have a question on that, but I'll wait till you've finished.
So, look, I'm happy to simply pause there and take questions.
So my question is a straight follow-up to that, what you've said. Thank you for the clarity on the motion that I've put up. In terms of how quickly or otherwise we can spend the money if we committed to it, presume you've got a weather eye on the future anyway, that you are working some proposals through. We don't know what's going to happen through the select committee. We all know that. We don't know where this is going to land. But presumably you've already got some forward thinking about the types of water projects, because they have to be spent on water infrastructure, right?
No.
Nothing.
No,
that's the follow-up funding, isn't it? So this is the better off package.
So this funding,
58 million.
the full 58 and the tranche 114, the subset, is not for water at all.
So you could spend it on fast-tracking cycleways or something if you wanted.
Paragraph 26 sets out the criteria, but it's all about sustainable and low emission economies for the community. and enabling housing and growth with focus on brownfield and infill. And so it's about placemaking and improvements in community wellbeing. So it's absolutely nothing to do with Three Waters.
Okay. Okay. So, right. Okay. So it would just mean, my emotion would mean a slight delay in rolling the money into projects. But you must be working on projects. You must have an understanding of potential projects. You wouldn't be waiting.
No. So definitely the answer is yes. So what we've done, with the help of other parts of the business, is we've provisionally mined the current LTP to look at what projects fit the criteria that could be accelerated, or what projects are in the current LTP that are unfunded. What we haven't done, though, is reached out to elected members around any other projects that elected members might wish to pursue. But if I come back to the timeline on paragraph 31, the cut-off for if you wanted to develop a project, there's a process to follow and an approval path to follow with the DIA and Crown Infrastructure Partners. So the reason for coming to today gave us enough time to work with Council, through information sessions and get the feedback and achieve all of those process requirements by September. But only if we were to proceed now as a council. I'm not saying this is a negative, I'm just making an observation. The staff recommendation and your motion lines up with it well, I think, which is we've got a large enough program of works already ahead of us in the draft annual plan. We've got a full program, and the 2024 LTP process is quite it's a good process for determining what does and doesn't get funded. So the recommendation from staff at its essence is lock the money in so you've got the contractual certainty, but leave the decision around what it's used for to that very structured 2024 LTP process.
Okay,
so
then there would be some contestability between projects and things?
And it puts it in context with everything else. So.
There'd be business case analysis on various things at that point, should this go that way. Okay, thank you. I think that's answered my questions for now. Councillor O'Leary.
I think Councillor Wilson's been waiting before everyone else, and then I'll go after him.
Okay, Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, thanks, Angela, for spotting that. And, Andrew, I've got a couple of questions if I could start with. The first being, just help me out. Before we talk about the 58 million better off, can you remind me, has the government currently provided all the funds they promised in terms of transition funding?
No, we have not seen the detailed framework and allocation for the transition funding. My understanding is that's still being finalised, and I expect something within the next month. But we have not received a proposal around allocation of transition funding yet.
Right. And just for further expansion, so Council currently, are we using our own resources to fund transition with some promise the government will eventually provide us some transition funding?
Not as at today. So we have been funding.
We are as of the end of this month?
Correct. So from 1 July. So there's just been a bit of new information, if you just allow me a moment. So we were funding our council costs through the stimulus work, which is reported through to the Infrastructure Operations Committee. And so that funding essentially stops on 30 June, right? So from 1 July there was an issue. Overnight I've become aware that the DIA is likely to issue an extension to December this year, but I haven't seen the detail on that yet. So it could potentially be a bridging solution, but remember that funding's already allocated to a range of other projects. So I guess a long-winded answer, I think you've correctly identified a funding gap, but depending on what the DIA come out with in the next month or so, that gap could be closed out fairly quickly, but it is an unknown.
Thank you. I guess I'm just trying to get to the, we're talking about a better off funding package with the same broad party, and I'm just trying to look in a commercial sense about this partner and this process that so far doesn't seem to be providing the funding when they promised they would.
your observations are correct. I think the difference with this better off is it's a contract, sitting here to be signed, whereas the transition funding is sort of just a discussion at the moment, and we're waiting to see a formal proposal for that. That's the distinction at this point. Everything changes fairly quickly these days.
Right, thank you. I won't labour that point, but I think I've made my point. Just in regards to the $58 million better off, what do you mean? What do you believe the government's saying in regards to the term better off?
I'm reluctant to answer on behalf of the government. I think that what I've heard in discussions is they're not looking for councils to be disadvantaged in the reform process. But look, I would prefer that I would refer that question offline to DIA or government to answer. I would have to refer back to their collateral. I would just be offering my personal view, which is not right.
Because I guess the reason I ask that question is, have you now finalised, or has the government told us what debt they are prepared to write us a cheque for?
No.
I guess that leads to the question, how can we be at all sure that this 58 million is a package of funding to give us a better off position, when in fact we don't yet know whether or not the government is going to pay the entire level of debt contributed to the water asset, and in fact the ratepayers could be left holding the bag for significant debt the government hasn't paid for, and as such we may even have to use some of the 58 million better off just to wash our own face.
The only certainty you have as at today, financial certainty, relates to the government offer of 14 million. All the other matters that you've raised are still subject to detail and to be worked through.
Final question. In your years, and they've been years where you've accumulated significant commercial experience, would this be something would this proposal and the parties, would this be something you'd be usually recommending us to sign up to when there's still more unanswered questions than answered questions, and there's still significant risk for this council?
I've personally never been in this unique situation because the party you're dealing with is the legislator. So it really comes down to councillors' individual views around decisions this government might make or successive governments might make, and that's what takes it away from a pure commercial consideration. All we've got at the moment is indications around funding and debt at a high level. Remember, the current draft bill really only deals with governance, it doesn't deal with the detail. So the only certainty is the offer of 14 million at this point in time.
Right, the 14 million, but that would be part of the broader 58
Correct.
Million if it all materialises.
Correct.
Shouldn't we be asking for more?
We have. We've asked for more on a range of fronts. We've asked for more for stranded costs in writing. We've asked for greater consideration for transition costs.
We asked for more better off.
We've asked for more better off funding. We've done that in writing and in person at various levels.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor O'Leary.
Yeah, just following on from Councillor Ewan's line of questions, I'm just trying to understand exactly what the motion signs us up for today. And I really want to understand, because in the actual agreement, in the agreement, well, first of all, does the motion sign us up to the agreement today?
sorry, I've only just had it as as of a few minutes ago. So the motion says, note staff report and gather feedback from council on tranche 1 better off funding. So the answer, my understanding is no, it doesn't
No, it
sign you
doesn't.
up.
Okay. So there would, if council accepts the 58 million or 14 million or whatever it's going to be, at some point we will have to sign this agreement.
Sorry, and I don't want to labour this. So if you want to lock in the 14 million, you've got until 30th September this year to sign the agreement. But in taking up all of that time, there is no time to put up the project proposals, which is fine, because all you do is you shift it all out to the 2024 LTP process. If you don't sign the agreement by September, that's equally fine. But you haven't contractually committed the government, and then you go with whatever the government is of the day and whatever's happening in this reform space in 2024.
Okay. Now the agreement talks about a no worse off package and a better off package. So I'm trying to figure out, I'm assuming the no worse off package is the 58 million. Is that right?
The no worse off package is another package that we haven't talked about today, and that's the package that our that's the package our stranded cost discussion sits with.
Okay. So our water assets are worth approximately 1.4 billion. So, and I know through the numerous reports that you've given us, somewhere along the way, you've done the equations in terms of assets, how much debt is on there, maybe you've taken out the 58 million. What's the net gap at the moment? Put aside the transitional cost to date, because that's being funded through the water stimulus, but sort of as a ballpark figure, even if we accepted this, signed up to this today at 58 million, what's the outstanding amount that we are needing to cover so that the start of this whole reform was at no cost to council? Or no, like roughly.
So are you, if they were buying the assets from council, is that the question, or just the cost to participate?
To cover all of our costs. So they're going to take the debt, so that comes off our books. There's the transitional cost that we've worked out. Well, we've already had, I think it was 500,000 in the stimulus package that runs out in a couple of days. The take off the 58 million. What's the, if it was real simple maths, what's the hole that needs to be plugged that we don't have certainty yet?
Yeah, so and I haven't done the maths. So
it's rough, yep.
Just on the fly. So roughly 1.4 billion of assets. These are our assessment of our assets value.
Oh, no, that's the value of the assets, right? 1.4 billion. But we'd have debt leveraged against those
about
assets.
330. This is our view. Remember, DIA will form their own view when they turn up.
Yeah, of course they will.
Yeah. So keeping
like the buyer setting their own price, right?
So the difference is 1.1 billion.
1.1 billion. Okay.
Right. Then you've got, so water stimulus is covering costs at the moment.
Yep.
I don't know where the transition funding will land. I suspect it could potentially be between $1.5 million. So let's use the lower bound.
Yeah.
I really don't know how our costs will track over the next 24 months. Depends on the tasks, DIA, but I don't think that level of funding is going to be enough. We've signalled in the annual plan process it could be a lot more than that.
Yeah.
So just put a round number on it, call it 2 or 3 million short.
Yeah.
The stranded costs was about
21 million short.
Yeah, 21 million short was our calculation.
Yeah.
So it's certainly 1.1 billion, and then a few lower order numbers in there, in that scale is where it heads to.
Yeah. Okay.
Could I make an observation though? Just if the entity were to buy the assets from council, that means council gets a cheque under that scenario for 1.4 billion.
Yeah.
But now the entity's got debt for 1.4 billion. So the community that's paid for the assets through council now has to also a second time around pay the 1.4 billion.
Yeah.
So there is just need it gets complex very quick is what I'm saying, and there's certain scenarios mean certain parties end up paying twice
Yeah. Yeah, no, I understand that. I'm just trying to get clear in my head. At the end of this process, come 1 July 2024 next year, when it's day one of the new entity and the city no longer owns the assets, how much money we're going to have to find if the government doesn't
So I think with the stranded costs,
cover those
we
stranded.
continue with stranded costs post that date. So I think that's important to understand.
Yeah.
That's 21 million.
That's reducing the size of the business because we're a smaller business.
Yeah.
And the work we did on that in the last CCO thing, we spread that over 5 years. What we put in our feedback was that we needed 30 million over 3 years, and they were offering us 8, so it was where the 21 million comes from.
Yeah.
If I may offer, one of the other risks I see, and it was discussed with Risk and Assurance Committee, is if the DIO or the entity, this sounds wrong, but it's easy for me to say it this way, that they don't take enough of the water business on 1 July 24, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because what they don't take, we're left with, but we don't have a use for. And so you can face those costs and the cost of sorting that out as well.
On top of...
And that's something that's just so difficult to dimension and would be additional as well.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I'll let others ask questions, but that it really concerns me that we would be doing anything today that wouldn't be highlighting our concerns, because we're starting to add up these numbers and they're considerable. And so just an extra question, just on page 179, in the criteria, it requires from government, it requires us to engage with iwi, and it's fairly prescriptive on how that would happen. 179, but what about, and this is in terms of if we accept the money and we put forward projects, we're required to engage with iwi. So what about the general ratepayer base though? Are we...
Yeah, so number one, you're quite right, it's quite prescriptive around iwi engagement.
Yeah.
But part of the reason for staff recommending that project considerations part of the 2024 LTP is I think, is to address the very issue you're talking about, which is community engagement and community views.
Yeah, okay.
That's why the LTP process is actually quite useful, I think.
And it's already there, it's not something we have to develop.
Yeah.
And just finally, if we put, so we'd work on the LTP with this funding in mind, and then we would extract those projects, send them to the DIA or whoever's doing this, and then they would either approve or not that money. So it's contestable in the sense that if we don't meet the criteria, they'd send it back to us and we'd have to do it again and put up something else. But it's not contestable that 58 million could then go to somebody, or part of that 58 million could go to somebody else. That is ring-fenced as...
The 58 is ring-fenced to Hamilton City.
Yeah, okay.
Just conceptually, the assessment that DIA and Crown Infrastructure Partners will do will be how the project fits against the criteria. You know, carbon neutral, all that stuff.
Yeah, okay, cool. All right, thank you.
Okay, nuisance as it says, I'm going to take a lunch break, and I know we've got the questions still here, but we do need to get through the Chief Executive's item this afternoon, and Greg Timms will be in at 1:45, so I'm going to take a break for 1:45 for lunch. We'll come back to this.
Okay.
Oh, we'll move into public excluded, so when we come back, we're in public excluded. Also move. Councillor Hamilton seconds, all in favour, everybody. See you at 1:45.